outlined.
So moved.
Motion to approve in a second.
Turk, aye. Bellis, aye.
Clef eye.
Ward, aye.
All right, thank you. Item 2, introduction of planning group and discussion of how they will proceed forward. Drew Ellerman.
I'm going to be brief. I'm just going to invite up Dave to come up with EPG. They're the company we've gone in contract with to do our Washington Fields kind of, hopefully,
You wanna
design
kinda
standards.
Tee this up a little bit about where we've come from, why they're here, et cetera.
Well, as you know,
That's right.
yeah, they're a company out of the Phoenix metropolitan area, but they have offices in Salt Lake City as well. They've done quite a few projects up there. Their specialty is doing design guidelines and planning for companies, bigger, just not your average subdivision, but multi-master planned areas, et cetera. As you know, the city's been considering what to do down in the fields, how to protect it. When I first started here, the general plan adopted the Washington Fields, and they put it in a bonus density kind of thing, as most of you know, especially Councilman Turk was here back then and remembers those days, and they wanted to preserve what they could, so we came up with the plan of this bonus density. The general plan set aside specific areas to use that bonus density in. It worked for a while, but I don't think it really ever accomplished everything we wanted it to the fullest. Recently, the city council's been having thoughts of the fields again. We went through and thought about doing a TDR in that area, the transfer of density rights. And we mulled that over for probably, I think, about a year and a half.
Yeah, we had Councilman Ward, Councilman Turk sit on that. Again, the fields being our primary look of not just TDRs, but design guidelines.
Design guidelines. Yeah, so we kind of went through thinking about the TDR, and that still could be a possibility, but we'll kind of get to that after. So we just wanted to actually bring in a third-party group to take a look, give us some ideas. We, kind of let that word out there, had a few people call Roger. I think 3 different companies called at different times, and this was the 4th that I'd come across from another project they had done, and I was really impressed with their work. So we kind of sat down with them and had a little powwow and thought about, moving forward, had them give us a presentation of what they, would do and how they could do it, and of course cost, and we came to that agreement. And so they're kind of here tonight to introduce themselves to you. They've already done some work down in the fields. They've gone through and looked at it from a different set of eyes than sometimes, that we look at. And Dave and I were just talking about this. Sometimes when you live in an area, you drive by the same stuff, it becomes kind of just, as I like to say it, I refer to it as white noise. You just got so used to it. But sometimes when someone else comes through that's not from the area, sees something that you're okay with, they're going, why did the city let that happen? Or here would be a great place to do this, and things that we just sometimes don't look at it through that perspective because we're just here seeing it all the time. And so we kind of talked about that today. And so I'm going to actually invite them up and invite Dave Harris up. And again, he's with EPG. And what they'll do is kind of just give you what they've kind of found so far and what their plan is. And then they're going to get some input from you as a city council as well tonight. So if that sounds okay, I'll invite Dave up and we'll kind of see what he's got to show you for the fields area. But I'm really looking forward to this. And again, what they're going to basically do is do a lot of public input. We'll have quite a few meetings with open houses, et cetera, get input from the public, kind of show them some different plans, say, what would you like to see here? Give them that opportunity and let them pick on those things. And then we'll kind of refine that and come up with a plan after all that public input and your input and the planning commission's input and staff's input, and hopefully come together with this great little plan that we can look at taking and putting in place in the city and going from there to help with our fields area and just specifically for the fields right now. And if it works out, then we can take that to other areas and create them for different parts of the city. We don't want maybe all of it to look the same because every place is unique and has its own characters, and that's what we want to get going for the field. So without further ado, Dave, I'll invite you up. He's got a presentation for you.
I was going to say that just as he starts, one of the things we felt is that, especially the fields, and the council's talked about this, so I think this aligns well. If we can just get people to understand maybe what the expectation is in the field, the anxiety when proposals come through with the fields could be reduced. As you know, whenever commercial is recommended, whenever this use or that use gets recommended in the field, people get really anxious. And every gas station looks like a heart, or what's the Love's truck stop. And even though that wouldn't be the intention, we just feel that some good design process, which again, we've had discussion of for some time, might reduce some of the anxiety, especially if people feel that they have a buy-in to this. I would also mention that our objective too in this process would be that the commission, the planning commission, play a significant role along with the city council.
Sounds good. So we're excited to be here, and I'm Dave Harris with Environmental Planning Group. I'm the Director of Planning and Landscape Architecture. About 30 years of experience in design and planning. Brett Hoffer is here with me. He's got our trusty drone. He's our commercial drone pilot. So we're going to do some droning around tomorrow, get some really cool images of key parcels of land in Washington Fields, and do some more kind of site reconnaissance tomorrow morning as we're down here. But today we really wanted to just touch base with you guys, let you know what we're seeing, just a real quick high level tentative view of what we've seen so far. Don't kick us out of town yet. If you see something or we show you your house and maybe we didn't like it or something, because we have no clue where anybody lives or any key pieces of architecture is. It's just like Drew was saying, it's different set of eyes. So we're going to go through. This is a document that we're going to prepare. It's going to be our final deliverable, so it's just a tentative document. Obviously, this is what we like to see in the fields, is the fields, right? Historically, it's been the farms, and we got these cows that came up and say hi to us. It was a beautiful day in Washington Fields. We'd love to see that somewhere 20 years from now still, I think. The reality is that possible, right? So what we want you to do is the council and the city administrators to think, I have some 3x5 cards we're going to hand out here in 15 minutes or so. We want you to think, as I go through this presentation, what would you like Washington Fields to be like in 20 years from now? And then finish that sentence. And then on the back, if you have some additional ideas from things that we've presented tonight, then you can write those down too. This is just a preliminary table of contents that we're thinking about. It's our goals and objectives, which will constantly be modified as we do public outreach and meet with the council and public and everything else. We'll kind of distill our goals and objectives and refine that as we go through it.
So forgive me on this, just real quick. This is just a presentation. Will this be available to the council? Because it wasn't in our packets. This is,
So the intention is they're just going to kind of lay out from their perspective, but this hasn't begun yet. So basically what's going to happen, we can provide this, but this is the beginning of the work they'll now have with you, the commission, eventually public input. And I don't even know what he's showing tonight.
This is just an open work session.
Whatever he presents, we can certainly
We have
provide
copies.
that.
yeah, it would be
But
available.
I want to just make it clear that
This is just a conversation
this is
starter.
more them saying, here we are, we're going to now begin, here's your role, and let's begin. It's
Yep.
probably going to be several months.
Thank you.
But probably 5 to 6 months process, I would imagine, once we get through all the public input and feedback from staff and everybody. We do have printouts of this. We brought with us 10 copies, so we can leave those behind
Thank you.
today when we're done. So today we kind of have a high level view of the study area, the past history of the population, the big boom times, things like that, neighborhoods, streets, housing, kind of character. And then we have just some development strategies showing you projects that I worked on personally, places around the United States that are unique, because of the planning grid and because of the vision that was placed before the development came along.
What did you do with their ranch?
So I worked with EDA. It was a company I worked with. It became AECOM, but EDA was Steve Kellenberg was the master planner for Ladera Ranch in, or, late 90s to 2000s.
I have a couple of good friends that live in there.
Yeah.
So I know it's a fairly young community.
It's pretty new. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's pretty built out now. It's pretty
Yeah,
much
there
done.
are 30,000 people.
Yeah, but Ladera Ranch is a very popular, very sought after community in San Diego, Los Angeles area,
Orange County.
Orange County. Yeah, it's a beautiful development. So these are just some initial draft goals, objectives. We don't have to go over this in details today. We won't have a lot of time, but critical success factors might be some stuff that we put down is have a continuous feel throughout Washington Fields. What does that mean to you guys? A continuous feel. What control do we have over that continuous feel? We have control over architecture style, colors, finishes, street network, curb gutter, landscape. What really makes a place special. So think about places you've been, Ladera Ranch, places in Phoenix or even northern Utah, really memorable communities, and think to yourself, what is it about that community that we can control as a city and as a planning team, as a group of community?
So where you coming in, so the fields is obviously not fully built out, but partially built out. How much more challenging is it than,
It's more challenging.
well, I mean, is that something that you do on a regular basis then?
Yeah, we're always dealing with this issue of stitching in new concepts with existing stuff that was built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And some of that stuff is, well done. Some of it is, 1970s mass built cookie cutter stucco houses and tile roofs as far as you can see.
Yeah.
But we have a chance here to develop the rest of this in a meaningful manner. So think to yourselves today as cities, number one, what are the tools we can use as a city? General plan, codes, visionary documents, overlay zones, TDRs, different tools. What tools do we have in our toolkit to influence this? And then what bold leadership do you have to stand toe to toe with the developers and landowners to say, no, this is what we want? Because that's the next step. We could do a beautiful visionary document here and everybody fall in love with it, including the community. But if we don't have bold leadership, it's not going to work, right? So as the council and as the leaders of the community, we need to have consensus with the community and with you as the leaders to really push this stuff forward. So we have to have complete buy-in. It's not just us, pushing our ideas on you. It's us collectively working together, discovering what Washington Fields really is, what's existing, what's really cool about it, and how can we preserve it into the future and make it even better.
Thank you.
Being the most sought after city to live in, Washington, this Washington Fields. So is that another statement? Being a very sought after neighborhood. Hey, I live in Washington Fields. I live in Ladera Ranch. I live in Verrado, right? It's like I live in this cool place, and they're proud of it. Because people are proud of it, they self-manage it. So it's easier for the city to govern, and it creates greater community, greater lifestyle, greater sense of pride. Identify new design principles for creating neighborhood crafting. When we talk about neighborhood crafting, what we're talking about is literally crafting the neighborhood. Like how wide is the street? Where is the sidewalk? What type of curb and gutter is in there? Is there a roll curb? Is there no curb? Is it an old-fashioned ditch that's engineered because it's in the fields? Is it curb separated sidewalk? What are we doing as a city to manage the street width? Can we narrow it up and have half as much asphalt that we have to maintain every year, right? And can we work with the fire department and everybody to agree to a smaller street section? Smaller streets are slower, they're safer, easier to cross. All these different things to think about. Create identity for Washington Fields. So what is the theme? What's the character? What's the brand of Washington Fields? We're going to discover that together. I don't know what it is yet. Ensure success of builders building in Washington Fields. So as we go through this, we're going to be back checking with our builder partners, and I'm going to say, hey, Cole West or Builder A, B, C, and D, are you guys willing to do this? Are you willing to side your houses to an arterial road if we give you more density? Are you willing to set back and front architecture to corners and major street intersections if we do X, Y, and Z? Enhance economic opportunities is kind of what we've been talking about, is creating a win-win scenario for retail corners, for builders, for landowners, for the economy of working in Washington Fields and with the city. Being on time and on budget with all our deliverables, goals, and objectives. So we just want to work together to work through this efficiently. And that's kind of our initial just ideas. So again, these will be modified as we move through it. This is the project area. So we have the Green Springs up to the north, historic downtown, Coral Canyon, and then Washington Fields was generally south of the river. And then this hatched area here is our limit of work generally. So we're basically along Washington Fields Boulevard on both sides of it a little bit, and then mostly to the west. So that's what the city has given us as our boundary to live within for this study.
Well, should we include the future annex area in that, since we know it's gonna be coming in? It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and we can do that now, but what we thought is if we can focus in the places right now where we already have this stitching, as he talked about, whatever design standards can be expanded out at that point. But this would be where his template is, and we kind of try to keep him a little bit more narrowly focused, both in scope and in cost and everything else. So, but yes, it would be the same thing. You'd kind of be able to duplicate a little bit as you move out.
Well, certainly I wouldn't want to, I mean, in any final document, I think it needs to be included in, I guess, in drafts or exhibits.
Yeah, and what you'll do is with this document, correct me if I'm wrong, but my anticipation is with this document, once this document is all finalized and everybody kind of says this kind of is generally what we like, then it begins to permeate through general plans, zoning codes, ordinances, and all of that. And then, of course, it'll cover all those particular areas. So that's kind of just why we focused it a little bit here, is because we think whatever design standards there will continue to fit on the unannexed areas. But at some point in the future, you may want to say to them, we'd like to change the scope of work and move that out. But that's certainly going to be an option.
There might be some big ideas, some big gestures that consider something to that annex area as part of this study, but we're not looking at that area in detail currently.
And it may very well be, and I'm just throwing this out because I'm just thinking of it, is you may have, let's say, I don't remember the name of the project, Jim Raines' project over there in Long Valley. You know, they may say, hey, we kind of like this concept. We would like to design along this line anyway. And then at that point, maybe we even just do some partnering up with them to use their services. We still keep control over that, but yet maybe there's a shared cost component or something like that. But then it fits.
What about, with the recent announcement from the church on putting a temple down there? I mean, it's St. George property, but it's gonna have a big effect on what happens generally in that vicinity.
Yeah, we don't, the reality is, I agree with you. The reality is, nobody knows whether it's St. George or Washington for the most part. They're just looking at boundary lines. Okay, as a matter of fact, it probably fits, technically, it doesn't fit, it's too far north to be really Little Valley. So it is technically Washington Fields. We really hope they come up with that name on the building. But I think these guys are familiar. That announcement, I think, is helpful for them because they're going to look at that component too as part of it, because that's going to be a beautiful addition to the fields.
To the area.
And that's not a comment on traffic and everything else that people are freaking out.
Well, but I think it's gonna affect the nature of the developments and the densities.
It absolutely will.
And things like that.
If you look at any of the building of those type of structures in times past, you know without a doubt it has an impact.
Has an
But
impact,
again,
yeah.
these guys have had some experience with that, so that the announcement is coming on the front end of this study for them is a benefit to us.
So I would see probably the most important part that we get this in place because of the impact that's going to be had down there. for that. So
That's right.
Even more so the importance of this.
Okay, appreciate it. This is a snapshot of 1993 all the way to 2017. So basically, we just did some Google Earth aerials to find out what the development booms were. In 1970, there was 750 people. In 1980, there's 3,920. And then in the year 2000, we had 8,116 people. So obviously you had this really cool grid, this field and farm character out here, had the river going through there. Very interesting. So we just wanted to kind of, for ourselves, and you guys, as we go through this, you can educate us on, key historic elements that might help us define Washington Fields as well. Then we had another boom from 8,000 to 18,000 people in 2010. And then obviously, again, we're in another boom cycle right now, going from 18 to 27,000 today in 2018. So there's just kind of some maps that we can refer back to as the development, how it goes through and how it affects us in the city. These are existing conditions. So this is basically a kind of black and white map of the current development grid in Washington Fields in Washington City. You can see the unique downtown traditional grid from the pioneer days when everything was very easy to walk around the block. There was no dead-end cul-de-sacs. It's a totally different feel, and that has a special character. So if you kind of think about the character downtown here versus maybe some of these neighborhoods down here, they're completely different, right? And so you can see how just in your own town, how the development grid and how we plan these areas really do have an effect on how we experience it driving around. So these are some initial shots of the neighborhood that you're very familiar with. We're just bringing them up so we can talk about them openly. But we have these intersections here, and these are kind of discussions that we need to have, and we need to just be very, very open with each other. And like Drew was saying, sometimes we drive by here every day and we say, hey, that's pretty nice. But is this intersection something that you want to see 20 years from now, or do you see something better? And then, another one here. So we have a little more landscaping here, a little bigger setback, a little bit more buffer. We have an attached sidewalk. It's not detached on the arterial road. A lot of our experience in towns and cities is how we view them from the car, unfortunately. Secondly, how we view them from when we can get out of our car and ride around on a bike if it's safe to do so. So these are just some character images of the existing conditions. Here's another shot, a little bit different wall, different style, a little bit of landscaping. It's curb separated sidewalk. The home is still what we call in the planning industry is backing. The development grid is backing to the arterial street. So when you drive around Washington Fields, you want to continue to see this condition. You want to continue to see walls, and then a wall, and then houses backing to the arterial street. These are some of the neighborhoods. Obviously, some of these are in transition, haven't been developed yet, or unkept. It's here and there. They're in transition. We have streets like this that are pretty wide. It's, in our opinion, unnecessary to have that much asphalt that's unused, and you have to sit and maintain it. It causes, I don't know what the traffic study is, or if this is a future right-of-way. I have no idea. We're just kind of throwing it out there that if we have an opportunity to reduce the width of a street and the width of the asphalt, technically it's an opportunity for the city to save money, because then you're not maintaining all that stuff. Additionally, we can slow traffic down. If you want people to go 25 miles an hour, then design a 25-mile-an-hour street. The second you put a yellow stripe down that road, people are going to go 40, 50, right? It's just psychologically what we're going to do. So those are the things to think about. I think this is off of Washington Fields here on the left. And then here's a neighborhood that we went into. It's drastically different because there's no curb and gutter. And we have this old fashioned ditch. Was it executed? Could it be executed better? Could we work with this design and create a really nice bio drainage swell through there with more landscaping and more vegetation, make that more attractive, and really create a really nice rural neighborhood street section?
So will your study actually look at the roads and those components? Because this almost has to be a private street, right? And the street you mentioned before,
This is a private neighborhood.
it probably will be important to look at both, that this is a private street, or maybe, I'm almost certain it is, but and then the future design elements of the other road.
Yeah.
Its width. Are you,
We're
so I guess that's
gonna-
my question. Are you going to be looking at the master transportation?
We're
plan?
not going to we're not going to do a traffic study. We're going to respect the arterial roads, the collector roads, the residential streets. We're going to look at what Drew has currently as his street sections, and then we're probably going to say, hey, here's what you have. Here's what you could have on a residential street, collector street, arterial street. We could make these changes to make them more attractive and still not affect traffic. So that is a possibility. It's a big visionary, it's a big aesthetic feature that goes through the whole city. Again, another neighborhood, there's no sidewalk. It's just a roll curb. You got a little picket fence there and pretty good landscaping, mature trees. Generally, it's an older neighborhood, obviously, in my opinion. Again, for whatever reason, these streets are really, really wide, right? As we look at these, we would narrow these up a little bit. So that's something we need to build consensus. We don't want to just throw that out there and push it. We want to make sure the residents understand the benefits, the pros and the cons of skinnying up the streets and making it a little bit more slower, more walkable, a little bit safer. That's all. So now we're going kind of looking at architecture style, different ways to treat buildings and architecture. If in a perfect world and we could throw codes and zoning and different districts together, we would affect the streets, we would affect the curb, the gutter. We would try to touch all these elements, and then we would try to guide and inspire the architecture. So this is what we would call a rear-loaded or side-loaded garage. It probably has a mother-in-law home that's attached to it. It's probably of some kind of a nice master bedroom right there, and then you can drive through the garage and back. Right next to it, again, we have a side-loaded garage and then a front-loaded garage. We're not proposing that you overbuild any one of these situations. What we want to do is build some character so that you don't have too much of one type of house. We want to be very careful with blending in to these existing neighborhoods so we don't have this drastically new character, which is pretty tricky. But we do want to consider all of our tools and explore methods in which we can side load or front load or rear load the garage. As we move forward, now I have an RV. I love parking my RV next to my house too, but do you want it visible, right? There's some really simple things that we can do to clean up the neighborhoods, make them more attractive, and we can talk about that with the residents as we move forward. Some houses are really beautifully landscaped. You have these great entrances. Other areas in Washington Fields, there's not even a road. It's just a house sitting out there with no road. I don't know if this is a county island or what happened, but
I think we'll say it is.
and then there's new houses being built right now that are corner lot conditions with the power panel on the visible on the street side, and it's got a few windows up high, but probably not enough architecture, what we call articulation on the side, to really create a crafted neighborhood that we would really be beautiful. So on a corner lot, we would want to design guidelines and inspiration or incentives to do corner lot conditions where the driveway's coming in on one side and the front door's on the other side. So for some reason, if you go back to the really old neighborhoods in Cache Valley and then even in downtown Salt Lake City, the pioneers did it, you know, in the 50s or the 40s, 50s, they did it. And for some reason, we got away from doing these beautiful corner lots. So those are strategies that we can think about.
Just to be clear with your statement there, you would recommend a design guideline for a house on a corner.
We would work collectively together
It
to see
wouldn't
if that's
necessarily
desirable.
apply to houses that have homes on either side of them. Is that what you're saying?
What was that question again?
You're talking about a design guideline that would affect houses that sit on a corner, but wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with houses that have other homes on either side of them.
Yeah, there would probably still be setback rules and building
Well,
envelopes
but I
and
mean,
other
the
things. But
Specific
the
guidelines.
specific guidelines for corner lots, yes. If we really want to go to the level of, crafting the future Washington Field's vision in the future, these are tools that we can use as designers and planners to influence change. One thing we want to do is discourage gigantic expansive walls on a corner lot with no windows. You know, gigantic 2-story stucco wall on a corner with no windows. That's the worst case scenario. This one's really not that bad. I imagine after this house gets finished, it's probably going to have some nice features on this side. And then we have, front porches and entrances that we can discuss as, guidelines. We're not saying whether we like these or whether they're good or bad or anything like that. We're just showing you some of the tools. We have parks within Washington Fields. This one, Pine View Park we walked through. It's got some, great open space there. Looks like you have a little Frisbee disc golf course that's fairly well maintained. It's along the river there. I don't know how much use it gets. Somebody has kind of championed this maintenance project here. So these are all kind of community features that we really like. We want the community to access this. We really like this picture here of this entrepreneur that cut the hole in the wall and put his Coke machine out there for the park users.
I wish.
And so this image here, we get it. The houses were there. The city owned the property. We built a park behind all these houses. And then you get different conditions that happen along this back property line. Some people want to put a gate in there. Some people want to put a Coke machine there. Some people have a view fence and some people have a block wall. I get how this evolved, but we can manage this and create a much better connected neighborhood if we front the houses to parks in the future. If you front a house to the park, then people are driving through the front of the house. They're driving in. They're self-managing. They're self-policing. There's more eyes on the park and less weird activity happens in the evening time because all those houses are fronting the park.
So my vision for all of these would be design standards for future buildings.
Yes. We can't-
Almost nothing of what you're doing or presenting or going to even discuss is going to have to do with things like this that would retroactively affecting neighborhoods.
That's correct. We're not going to be able to go back and magically fix these situations. I'm bringing it to your attention. We don't want to keep doing this.
Which is exactly the point of why we're trying to look at it, so we don't resent
Yeah.
certain things
Yeah.
in the future.
That's
As many
exactly
things.
right.
On this is we're kind of just addressing the stitching concept going forward, how we can stitch together and set some good standards.
Yep.
And then as we build out, we can actually come back with the same standards as we revitalize and look at things as they age. So it's
These
just the
things will
standard.
gentrify. People will move in. Land value will increase. It'll get better. People will have an opportunity to tear down the walls, but beautiful view
Right.
fences in. City can say, well, if you do that, then this is the type of view fence you're going to put in.
Correct.
So we can affect that change just like an overlay district downtown and different things, different opportunities. That's correct. We're also using these as examples so that we can illustrate what has happened and agree collectively as a community that there's a better way to do it. Right? And so the park is beautiful. It's a great asset. It's a great amenity. All we're saying is let's front to those parks in the future. Let's bring those parks into the communities so that the kids can literally walk out their front door walk across the street and go right to the park. In some cases, you might even have an alley loaded house where the kid doesn't even have to cross the street. They walk out their front door down the sidewalk and they're in the park. That's even a better situation. So that's kind of the vision that we're kind of playing with. These are some development grids and projects that we worked on just to show you how some of these other projects were executed and what the built product is. This is Verado. It's 8,000 acre master plan in Buckeye, Arizona. So there's this downtown fairly formal grid, and then it breaks apart into more organic character. This is what that community looks like today. So you have this beautiful downtown. Literally, there's a Bank of America on the corner and a Bash's supermarket, and the 3-4 story mixed use with retail, office, and housing up above. It's kind of the perfect scenario. You come into the town square. It's your sense of arrival. Hey, I've arrived. And then you have this really great spine to the community park right in the middle. And then from there, you have parks that connect to the rest of the community. In a perfect world, we'd love to do that for you and master plan whole Washington Fields. It's kind of broken up, but we can use some of these ideas, some of these features, some of these elements of how we front or back to a future school, how we treat retail areas, how we can create a little downtown retail corner and really cool places within Washington Fields, maybe not to the scale. This is how the arterial roads are treated in Verado. So you have smaller walls with openings. Instead of dead-end cul-de-sacs, we have these openings so you can actually see into the neighborhoods. And then you can see that the setback is a lot bigger. And we have a very, very formal street tree concept. So it's a very memorable street tree theme. This is another shot. So just in plan view, what we're talking about is homes that side to the arterial road. These homes are siding architecturally. So this side of the home has a property line wall here, and then you have architectural character on these corners. So these corners of the house are visible architecturally instead of a big property line wall. And these are just planning strategies that we can create, and then this is what that looks like in perspective. So you have a lot more visual clarity of the architecture, sharing your home, your front porch, and the architecture, living outside, living inside. You also have a lot better pedestrian connectivity. So instead of my son having to ride his bike all the way into the neighborhood and all the way around the corner and back out a half a mile to get to the candy store, he can walk through the end of the alleyway and right onto the connected street network. This is another development. It's a higher density. It's a mix of alley loaded and front loaded houses. This is the development grid. So we have a major collector that goes right through the middle of that neighborhood, which is illustrated right here. And these are what we call courtyard homes. They're fairly high density. They're side loaded. There's an alleyway in the back. So your garbage cans and alley and garages are in the back. And then all these homes share a courtyard. So they're basically a courtyard home. And what that looks like as you drive down this major arterial street is these little peekaboo views into these beautiful courtyards that are still fairly secure. Kids aren't, there's a barrier there. There's a defined space. Kids aren't necessarily running out into traffic, and it's fairly well managed, but a lot different way to treat these arterial edges. And here's another shot there of how these houses kind of side in architecture, and then how you can access the neighborhood. And then this one here is Ladera Ranch. That's the one that we were talking about. Interestingly enough, there is a lot of this very traditional cul-de-sac type development in Ladera Ranch. But how did they execute it? So we have a lot of this here in Washington Fields, so we can stitch it in there. But did they treat the architecture? How did they side or front these? And they just took a lot more care in managing the architecture style, managing how the house fit the corner. So we have,
What is the angle that you're showing up there?
this is kind of the view.
Oh, the view,
So
the
this
view
is,
angle.
this is
Okay.
the view angle that we've shot below. So we're kind of, I'm showing you a plan view. So you
Gotcha.
can see how the neighborhood was laid out, and then we can see how the house was set on the corner and how all of the treatment was taken care of. So we have a front door here. I would imagine there's some kind of side architecture, but these are two very nice, not driveway and front porch, but nicely treated corner lot condition. So I'm not saying that every lot has to be the same, but we need to consider them. We have these little eyebrows that come out, and it's not very efficient to do this, but sometimes it adds relief and character. We always say, well, a street is kind of like a sheet music. You don't want it to all be the same. You want some crescendos, you want the melody, and you kind of want different things happening along that street. So that's what's happening here is we want to create opportunities for the developer to use our tools to create drama, to create an experience. As they drive through Washington Fields, they're driving through a beautiful place that reminds them of home, and they're coming home.
So I don't know how I feel about that particular feature, but I am all for street features being named after facial features. I like that.
They did this all right across the street from my friend's house. They did one of these, it was a kind of little turnout. And they had homes in front of it. Actually worked pretty cool. The way it was executed.
So, and in some of the retrograde kind of rehabilitation of areas, this is Orem, for instance, has 800 South, which of course has been a road forever. And of course, as they widened, they were able to end up doing some of this to, again, provide relief. So it is backing out onto the main road and other things. But again, it's a good tool, and it can be even used when revitalization in some cases.
Yeah. So it's generally happens when we're planning a grid, we're creating land efficiencies, trying to get the density we want. We have a leftover sliver, and then we create these cool little spaces that end up being these quirky little corners and these unique pullouts and eyebrows and stuff like that.
So I think once they started doing that, some of this isn't the most economical way to build, but it's certainly the property values, at least in that area, are really, really solid, I guess. Does that make sense?
They don't.
Property values are higher, but they're very stable too.
That's right. So during the recession, all these communities across the nation during the Great Recession, they were affected, but not as much as the other neighborhoods that were not master planned. So we can't guarantee, we can't say that they're immune to economic problems, but what we've observed and what I've personally observed is, Verrado and Marley Park and all these developments were still selling during the Great Recession, and the houses just didn't lose value as great as the other builders that were right next to them that had no master planning character or anything whatsoever. So we know for a fact that parks and trails and open space and good architecture and street trees and landscaping and good planning is more desirable. It's more comfortable to live in, creates a fun place to live.
But what we've given them the direction is that as they look at the fields, it's important that they recognize all uses. So we're not
That's right.
building an elite section of the city, but rather we're looking at design standards that can be applicable for all level of uses.
That's exactly right. That's why we're not promoting any one of these development grids. We're just saying, hey, this is what we currently have. These are other development grids. Let's mix it up a little bit. Let's find out what works in different areas of Washington Fields. Give builders the tools and the incentives to either side or front or back. And if they back to an arterial street, here's the setback, here's the landscape, here's the requirement. If you side, you can increase your density. You can do these things. If you front, here's the density, here's the different tools that you can use to front. So we're giving them all the tools, and then we're also trying to create a vision, an inspired vision to build, and so that we can back into a code. These are more examples of Ladera Ranch, and these are a lot more typical to what you would see Washington Fields. It's just that the architecture was managed differently. And cities traditionally don't like to get into managing architecture, so usually these are managed by PUDs or other tools or other development means, but we can still create a visionary document that inspires a recessed garage or a side-loaded garage. And this is just a traditional street. They're all front-loaded homes. It's easy to build. It's very understandable. And then obviously the corner house, the big corner house with the driveway and the front porch and everything else. And then what that looks like as a plan view development grid is pretty traditional to what you've already got here. Let's just do a better job of managing it and inspiring that development in the best way possible. And then lastly, we just threw another one in there because we want you to think, if money were no object and there were no restrictions, what could we collectively do together to create a great place? This is Savannah, and they have this grid. It's pretty famous as a planning grid. Anybody been to Savannah? So what was it like?
It's nice down
Is it memorable?
there. Oh, yeah.
Why is it memorable?
Well, just, if you did a lot of that downtown off by the river, did you do a lot of that?
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. I
because
wish we had a river we could do that in the middle of Washington.
you do have
Not
a
the
river,
Virgin
but it's a little crazy. The Virgin River is a little bit out of control, but yeah, the river here, this river edge is pretty cool. But the other thing is these parks that are in every single neighborhood. So you have these parks that are in there that creates a pretty unique experience as you walk through it. There's no reason we couldn't, show these tools, show these planning grids, and hey, if a developer wants to do a different inspired grid, we could maybe allow higher density in certain different areas. So we need to get the community, we need to get consensus, we need to get feedback from you guys, what you're willing to go to, what lengths we're willing to go to really create a great place. And
Savannah, old buildings have regulated by ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
Then Savannah?
Yeah.
Ghost was another.
yeah,
So real quick, just a thought. One of the examples I would use is, I know this has been a council that's really tried to encourage the developer with PUDs because it gives the opportunity for the city to kind of make sure there's a certain character, there's a certain feel that is maintained. And I look at the Sullivan project down there on 2000 and Washington Fields Road. And you remember that still took a long process with the council to kind of basically take, and I'm not even going to include staff at this point, but 5 people's input on what that should look like. And then,
In all fairness, we were going through rolling out the ordinance.
oh, absolutely. No, I'm not critical of it all. As a matter of fact, but wouldn't it have been nice? This was the point I was getting to, is wouldn't it have been nice to have, let's call these kind of guardrails of design that everybody has already kind of at least agreed upon, and then it's just the process of putting all the pieces together. And not just that, but let me add the community, of course, who had their own image of what that was going to look like, which was completely different, I know, than 5 of you. And so this is what we're trying to do, is to try to add some value to the work that you do by saying, we've got this kind of already shared vision that everybody's kind of at least agreed upon, and now we can work within the parameters of that. And there's some confidence that can be gained from that, whether you're the developer, whether you're the resident nearby, or whether you're the council and the city on what this will look like at the end of the day. And that, I think, is kind of our objective here. And I think it'll be very valuable to us in the field, because it's still a pretty open, I still think it's a pretty open palette out there still.
some great opportunities.
Is this basically seen as an opportunity to add kind of an addendum to the general plan of something that gives further insight above and beyond what we've already listed within our general plan?
Yeah, I don't know, logistically, that probably would make sense.
I'm just trying to
Appendix
put it
To
together.
the
in my
general
head.
plan, and then the general plan, of course, would reflect whatever the design standards are.
Yeah, I think the general plan ought to touch on it, but I think your zoning ordinance would be the one that you want to have some teeth to it. The general plan,
Absolutely.
I don't want to say this in a bad way, but it doesn't carry a lot of teeth. That's why we call it a general plan. But your zoning will have more teeth, at least give some more direction that needs to be critically followed because it is the design standard in that area.
I really think your developers would embrace this, because again, they're gonna kind of know what is the playing field I'm playing within.
Right.
There's gonna be some influence by the council that choose to go with PUD route. But what is the arena I'm playing in? And I already know what that is. And I'm either gonna say that's workable, now let me work with the council, or I'm gonna say it's not workable, I'll have to go some other city. If they wanna go to another city, that's okay.
Yeah, but it really helps them not to have to try to think, well, what am I going to, they start with a blank canvas sometimes with no direction. So they're thinking, well, and they'll come to me, what does the city really want? And it's like, well, I don't know really what to tell you there exactly, so, but if we give these design guidelines, their canvas is 80% already right in front of them. They can just tweak and put in their flair, their niche, their touch.
Well, let me just touch on that as well. Is usually what we've seen happen, not usually, but on occasion, what we've seen happen is they'll throw their best rendering up to start with, and the neighbors hate it. And they're doomed from that point on. They're doomed from the point they threw their first rendering up, even though they didn't know what was expected, because everybody's going to say, well, what's going to stop you from just doing what you did before? I mean, again, it's a buy-in by lots of level of stakeholders. That's what we're trying to do here, and I think it's great.
Well, and I'm looking forward to the process. I'm looking forward to hearing input from folks and hearing this kind of come together. I'm certain that there's aspects from the designer as well as the public and as well as developers that I have not thought of. So I'm really looking forward to hearing all of this and seeing it come together.
So you can say we just barely touched the surface, just showing you, just kind of get the wheels rolling,
Yeah.
showing some tools that we use every day to treat roadways, to treat development grids. In our opinion, we start with the development grid because that's where it can get messed up the quickest, right? The second you put the building in the wrong place, in the wrong orientation, you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. You're backing to that park for the rest of your life. You can't change it, right? So that's kind of where we're starting, and it's an open discussion. We want your input. We have these 3x5 cards. You don't have to fill them out right now, I guess, unless you want to, but we want, you probably don't have time, but what we'd like you to do is fill out this card. It says 20 years from now, what would Washington Fields will be, use your imagination, or I like these tools, I don't like this, or whatever, but give us some feedback.
Can you talk briefly about next steps and kind of process?
Yeah. So tomorrow we're going to do some more site investigations. We're going to drone some key areas. We're probably going to sketch over the top of some key corners, some different possibilities, and then we're going to plan a public workshop, advertise that, and then bring the community in. We're probably going to have a key speaker that's going to talk about placemaking and get everybody excited about it, so it doesn't sound like a strong arm law is coming to put policy. What we're trying to do is encourage the community to be excited about their ability to really affect change and to be part of the process.
In that process of exciting the community, will there be some conversations with our larger property owners and stakeholders where you're proposing these ideas as well?
Yeah, we want all those people to come to that same meeting. If we need to have special interest group meetings separate from a public open house or public event,
I
then we
feel
can do that.
one thing to be really important to get the right type of excitement to these meetings is if there could be a proper conversation with them, even just to say we'll be talking about concepts within your property before it comes to us and saying this is what we're going to do to your property.
Yeah.
I think that's the best direction to take this. I know that there'll be a lot of conversation as a city as we move forward in setting these standards. And as you said, come with that right idea and stand toe to toe once we set them. but I'm insanely sensitive to starting the conversation out on the right foot.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I know that many people have had interesting conversations and feelings when they come and find out that there's something drawn over their property and they're last to know. I think if there is some significant property owners, maybe that's something we can do as staff or whatever to talk with them leading into any type of design or rendering over property that already exists. So
And
just
I
some
guess to
thoughts.
clarify, we probably wouldn't sketch over the top of the properties until we got more feedback
And
further
then that's
along.
just one of the things I just want to keep
Yeah,
in
that's a good
mind, that
idea.
I'm sensitive to the perception that we can put out, especially at the beginning of such a beautiful conversation. The last thing I want the people to feel is that, by the way, here's what you want to buy into. This is what we're going to be doing.
We don't want to be selling any Kool-Aid in this meeting yet. We want everybody to tell us what
Right.
Washington Fields is going to be in 20 years and what they envision, what they value in terms of connectivity and circulation and architecture and things like that.
I guess my conversation, just wrapping it up, is as we move forward with staff and working with this design, is making sure that that conversation starts on the right foot.
I love the term, it's actually not an old term.
The guardrails of design? Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about a different term.
Concept of placemaking, and that in and of itself, I think lends itself to the understanding that we are all trying to define this place. It's not going to be just, it'll eventually be design standards and things, and it'll eventually be incorporated in that, but the place making is an active process that I think everybody's going to, matter of fact, if you want to know the truth, most of our discussions that have ended up in, we don't want this and you want that, and you want that and you don't want that, have technically been just hostile versions of placemaking discussions. We're just going to try to create it in a more productive way.
That's right. I think that's really good. And I think we start with a blank slate. You know, we need the community to come in and feel like we're not pushing anything, but we need to inspire them with tools, right? Because a lot of people, in my experience, they drive down these streets every day. They don't see the possibilities. They can't see what the options are. So we'll see people coming in and still wanting a curb and a 5-foot sidewalk and a wall. So we need to see if people want something different and then show them tools and inspire them that there's greater places that have been built all over the country that have value. So
Thank you.
I'll leave these with you.
I'll get these to you later.
So yeah, fill out the cards. We'll collect them somehow or other. But we want to.
Get them back to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Appreciate that. Okay, move on to item 3, discussion and review of proposed Parks and Recreation Capital Facilities Plan. Is that you,
Yeah,
City
that's-
Manager?
Yeah, actually, I'm just gonna have Steve come up, so
Okay.
I think he needs to get plugged in, but to be honest with you, we've had a long discussion on this, and actually, I would even feel comfortable with, so there was some direction, and I apologize that even some of that direction I wasn't as clear on from the last meeting that was brought out, and I think that we've addressed that. I hope we've addressed that, and I would even feel comfortable with a couple of our council members who specifically had some questions about that. Steve can run through it quickly, and if that didn't answer your question, you can tell us. But hopefully it did, and please, the two of you too, also feel free to dive into it.
As a preface to clarify what Roger's saying, we did meet with Sunrise, Councilman Belliston and myself, to voice a few concerns. So we have a little bit of advanced discussion. So I'm excited to see what's discussed before I shed a lot of my thoughts.
Yeah, most of the reason we did that is just to make sure that we were understanding what the council felt was not quite there
Right.
last time. And so hopefully we've addressed that. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. All right, yeah, so just to recap, this is the same spreadsheet that we had, that we showed previously, that basically has a summary of what the existing impact fee was and maximum eligible impact fee. And I might note that since the last time we showed this, we actually came to our attention, there's 2 of the parks that have actually been built since the time the plan was originally done. And we have some exact costs that we placed in here, which actually would essentially drop the max eligible impact fee to $6,085. So we have some actual costs. Those are the Shooting Star Park and the Hellhole Park Trailhead. Shooting Star Park came down, Hellhole Trailhead went up a little bit. And then the net came down a little bit. And last time we talked about, so these are the options. We broke out the fields. We renamed it Washington Fields Park Complex, broke it out into 3 phases, basically a third each. And that 13 acres is a pretty good size for 4 baseball diamonds if you were to go that route with the baseball diamonds. And so the 13 acres is a good size for a park. So we've broken out into those three phases. And then, so you've seen the spreadsheet before, but basically it's just a way of determining, okay, so we have the existing debt that's got to be paid for by impact fees. You got your plan. You have some of these parks that are already built or being built, like these first 3, the whole Park Trailhead, Boilers Park, Shooting Star Park, and then deciding, okay, priority on which parks are priority, how many miles of trail do we want, and those kind of things, which would then give us an actual impact fee amount based on selections of parks and trails, that has a meaning to it. It's not just some number pulled out of a hat. So that's kind of the utility
So
of
roll
this
down
spreadsheet.
this and we'll talk about these real quick because this is kind of was the brunt, not too far, just to the parks. itself,
okay.
A little bit, right there, proposed parks. So we have Hellhole and Shooting Star Park. Those numbers under column D represent impact fee credits, which again, that's unrealized impact fee. So that's why those are represented with those totals there. Boilers Park is what I believe is estimated to be the cost of that. Those are the 3 committed parks. We then took, based upon the previous discussion of a month or a month and a half ago, I can't remember, the Washington Fields Park Complex, and we broke it up instead of one big bite. We broke that up based upon input by council into these phases, with the next priority being phase 1. And then there's that total there. And then, of course, we just kind of stacked them after that. The stacking's not important. You guys can move that stacking around. Quite frankly, after Washington Fields Park Complex 1 and whatever proposed miles of trails you want, you can't fund the rest of them anyway. So you can stack them any way you want at this point, or it will have an impact. If you want to fund them, they'll impact your impact fee above. So, and again, we can still tweak because we don't know necessarily what the wishes of the council is. I think it's singular, still councils. If the council feels differently on the miles of trail, that's still kind of whatever you decide, knowing that it would just still kind of impact whatever that was up above. So based upon the scenario, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, based upon this scenario of getting you through line 49, plus your 0.5, right? That's where you came up with the 4,500 and
Right.
change.
Yeah, so this kind of shows you, so it would be 100% of those 3, which we know are happening, 100% of this phase 1 of the Fields
Thank you.
Complex
There you
and
go.
0.5 miles. And that gives you, in fact, I'll just copy that down here so that we can,
Where's
You
that
can see it.
0.5 miles
that's just the number that,
proposed at? There is no proposed, that's just saying a half a mile.
that's just
You're gonna
saying,
get half a mile of trail out of that price.
that's what was left over. That's what was left over after doing the phase 1.
And remember, we averaged the price, so really it could be a little higher in one area, it could be a little lower, but it's kind of the average cost per square foot
So I
per
think,
lead.
I think it's important in here to respect to some of the parks that would be bigger in nature, or even some of the trails, there is funds outside of the area that can be pursued. And certainly would like to encourage, staff to pursue those. I know UDOT's working on some trails with St. George City, along with the county is working on some trails with St. George City.
Yeah, as you
I
can
think
see,
that's something we need to.
I agree with
probably
you.
gear up more for.
And Councilman Bellson, you brought that up before, and we just need to kind of get a concerted effort with respect to that. I mean, I think the council will actually be a big part in helping us that, especially with the county in that. As you can see, because there's 1, 2, 3, and 2 additional phases of the Washington complex that are not even funded at the moment, we got plenty of need. And so we've got plenty of, and so we would absolutely do that. We'd try to pursue, in the event that they were unsuccessful, we would just have to know that they'd have to be picked up if these were the parks continued to be decided upon. They just have to be picked up in the future in some form of funding, whatever that may be. So yeah, I think anything we could get as far as some cooperative. We already know that we have a couple of, how serious they are, we don't know, but we've had some private venture groups that have come in with some different concepts. And again, we're all for public-private partnerships, or even private contributions if they make sense to us. And some of those we're still pursuing. We've actually had another one come in with regards to some additional fields complex to talk to us too, but we don't know, we'll bank on those yet. But absolutely, as you can see, we've got a huge deficit on parks, and we haven't even addressed some of the parks that have to still match up with some of our big growth areas.
No, we do, but I appreciate you putting it in this format to where it ties back to something, and you can say, okay, here's what we got, so, great. That also encourages us to look outside of, the impact fee funding stream, to afford some of these other issues that we do need to address.
And so the overall layman term on this is basically if the council agrees to the 4,552.50 at this point, what would be 100% covered within that impact fee over the 10-year horizon we're looking at are the parks listed through items 70 through 72 and 76 within the 10-year horizon.
And the additional trail.
And the additional trail, everything else is still within our plan.
Yes,
We listed in our horizon, but we don't have the ability to pursue those within that 10-year window.
And again, I pointed this out to the council the other day, is the fact that, again, if sometime down the road, there would want to be a modification of the identified park, and that could be for a variety of reasons. One, it couldn't be built or something like that. Amendments to the capital facility plan. If they don't change the impact fee, is one process. If it does change the impact fee, it's a different process. But that's still, I think the impact fee statute itself recognizes that things sometimes don't always happen precisely right. Councils change, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is a process laid out to make those modifications.
Is your spreadsheet still functionable? What if you were to include line 73? What does that do to your bottom line, to your impact fee?
Oh, so basically I'm going to have to, maybe I'll go backwards
I just
here.
remember the last one you had where you went click, click, and it.
Yeah, no,
it's
it'll,
like, ah, let's
it'll
see if
do
we
it.
included one more. What does that do to it?
It'll do it. Basic, oh, now I got it.
Councilman Turek, in all fairness, one of the concerns that I raised, I think is fair for the council to mull over with us all together. One of the concerns that I had is that over the next 10 years, a majority of our growth will happen down in the fields. Knowing that the intention of setting this impact fee is to service new growth, both in the impact we'll have for existing parks, but mainly to create new parks. I was concerned that we really didn't have a solid park for that main growth within 10 years. And so one of the things that I pushed for was seeing if there was a way within this horizon to have a park built within this change, especially since a lot of this is going to be revenue generated from fields and their impact fees. I would love to see the trailhead built as well, and I'm happy to see what they do on that. But just to let you know why that went that direction, that came from a lot of my concern with the overall concept of where this money is coming from. Is it serving where a lot of this growth is happening?
Yeah, but you're going to have a fair amount in Green Springs,
You're right.
and that's where your Grapevine Trail is headed up. It's going to service that Green Springs population. That's why I was even saying, okay, what does it do if we include it in there? What is the impact there?
Correct.
It looks like we're.
I just wanted to have a
4,800.
conversation.
48
so
is
we weren't
that
on the
total?
same page.
48. Go ahead. 45 and 48.
$300. Interesting. It's nice to have a spreadsheet that'll do that.
This is just a fantastic tool.
One thing I think would be of a value, where we can show the actual physical locations of these places. I think that'd be a helpful thing for us to just kind of review.
So on your parks master plan, your capital facilities plan, it does have the
Yeah, we
identified
have it.
locations of each of these areas as part of the plan.
Well, I'm just saying within the concept of, I know one of them you've broken down into 3 phases since the last time we met. I mean,
Yeah.
there are some significant
No,
things that I
you're-
can't
you are-
see.
You are correct on that, and actually the level of discussion, which I thought was an excellent discussion on the part of the council, is one of the things that the council still needs to kind of deal with, the staff needs to deal with, kind of, are we looking for a complex which has one objective, or are we trying to just look at serving our own citizens' needs, which is a different concept and may determine how you lay them out. I think Councilman Turk brought up the fact that if we're serving our own youth, having one big complex in one place may not work.
Nice thing.
And it really was a thoughtful discussion, and that's why I think the phasing makes some sense, because that still gives the council also time to kind of come to some terms on, what is it that we want.
I
the
think the
objective.
phasing, in my mind, makes sense, because if it's just phase one, that's for us. But if we're actually gonna move forward with phase 2 and 3, that is a regional park, and that should come with some additional assistance from outside the city. So.
Or those could be other locations. Or 2 or 3 could be other locations.
It could, absolutely.
But also the phasing goes to the heart of what Councilman Turk was talking about, and that is the phasing associated with the existing ball field as well. And I think we're very comfortable after visiting with that. Drew and I spent a little time, Drew's now left, but Drew and I spent a little time talking about the phasing of the existing parks, and we're very comfortable that can happen up there with retaining concurrent uses for a while. But at some point, we will need another field. So I think we hit a lot of points with breaking that up, so that's good direction.
Back to your point, Councilman Clough, and I like the idea, because let's break out, look at Hellhole, obviously we're towards Coral Canyon, we're servicing some growth that's happening out that way, and it's part of our trail system. Boilers, obviously, we know where the boilers are going. Shooting stars in the fields, Washington Fields, I guess it's going in the fields, it has the name of it.
But I wasn't sure about.
That's tentatively identified for that area, because originally, remember, we were looking at the full complex.
Right.
So we were limited in what our land availability was, not to mention we were also trying to partner up. So this is one where we already were considering partnering up. Now, it's not reflected in the dollar amount because it hasn't happened. But if we can get RP&P or something like that, that's a significant reduction in the cost.
So where is that proposed right now?
Just
We had 2 sites. One was down there by Stuckey,
No,
which is that's the primary site we were looking at. But we've also talked in some time past of the basin down there off of the
3650.
yeah. Yes, thank you.
And then does the boilers, Barry's not here, but if I remember right, the boilers park has a trail that ties over in to the Mill Creek Trailhead, is that correct?
We do have a trail as part of this development that goes to the other side of the road basin. To the Mill Creek Trailhead.
We'll go up we'll follow the creek on.
So it really just goes to when it is.
Now, another interesting concept about all of this is that once we set this into motion, one thing that was brought up that I feel like needs to be kind of fleshed out is we are in a lot of ways behind the ball in the needs of our parks. And the concept is how much do we make that concept go up? And so there's opportunities once we set this in motion. This takes care of our basic needs, but allows us to open up conversations with regional opportunities. It opens up bonding concepts. It opens up to all ways where maybe we can look in ways of providing these things and paying for it more responsibly. Timeline's got to be considered. If we continue the rate we are, maybe we do our first 3 and wrap them up in 5 years, then we don't even talk about the 5th or 6th option for another 5 years.
Part of the reason I guess I love the Mill Creek Trailhead thing, and just my thinking out loud, is in all reality, you open up a park that is, because those people aren't gonna stay on the trail, they're gonna get into the stream, they're gonna cross into that stream and across both sides, and that whole valley opens up, and there'd be a huge park in its own self at a very minimal cost. You're not developing a park per se, but in reality, kind of like a trailhead into the preserve almost.
So I think the most
So-
important thing about this is our final role is to say, okay, where are the priorities in this change? And I think you brought up some beautiful concepts. So I love the concept of the Mill Creek Trailhead. I think it's beautiful. Is that something that we bring into this adjustment of this part of this raise, or do we put it further down?
Yeah,
That's
I
the
mean, my
question.
personal opinion is, I would like to see it within the 10-year period. I think the community benefits the needs for it there. I guess I look and say for $300, is it worth it?
Well, one of my concerns, what I love most about your thinking is you're pulling more into the type of parks that I feel like really do reflect the identity of who we already are. I think the Mill Creek pulls into that bigger space that even though it doesn't have the soccer field and everything else, it is that beautiful open space that is just so unique.
Well,
and
it's got the
beautiful.
rocks you can crawl in, you've got the stream you can play in,
It's
it's
that sense
got
of
the,
discovery that, and it's
Right.
beautiful, it's nature at its finest. And so I feel like it's very valuable. Now, is it valuable enough to come that extra $300 up at this field? Or do we move something off of there? Or do we partially fund something and not completely fund it? And that's where I would like to have a solid feel of the council before we vote on this tomorrow. And if you honestly feel that's something we should go.
I
ahead
think
and
the
do.
difficulty in the parks is you pretty much either have to fully fund them or not.
Or not, yeah.
It's the idea of how many miles of trail, that you can partially fund that or fully fund it. I mean, the trails, that one's a little bit arbitrary.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree with you, Councilman Turek, so.
I don't know, I kind of like that figure myself. I like the product we get from that figure.
Well, you know, another thing I really appreciate, Councilman Turek, which with Councilman Nelson Bush in our meeting is as soon as you asked for that to see 100% funded, it came up with an exact number of what that would be.
Correct.
We didn't want to have this, well, about this amount. We wanted to be responsible in the raise. So if we do it, we didn't want to say, well, we'll pad $150 on there.
Correct.
You know, this is down to the cents.
Yeah, basically,
We wanted to be very responsible with whatever raise happened. It had to be tied directly to a project. Here's the cost. Let's do this.
Well, I like that too, because people know what you're going to get.
Exactly. And we didn't want it to be like this, just raising it to raise a concept. It's just a very surgical approach to what we will do.
So what we would probably look for tomorrow would be some motion. That's what we'd hope for tomorrow, is some motion, and then see what, if any, motion carries. I know there's 2 or 3 lines of thinking. I think we've kind of hopefully answered the questions, hopefully wrung this out more than we normally have, but all to the benefit, I think, of the discussion.
May I ask a quick question, Roger? And you know this from the historical aspect. Traditionally, our impact fees have been higher. What were they at their highest peak previous to what they are now at the 37?
So the highest that the park has been was 4,000, and that was set a number of years ago, and then it was dropped. And it was dropped arbitrarily. Now, I say arbitrarily.
4,000 was an arbitrary number too.
Well, no, they're all tied to capital facilities plans,
Well,
but
but it was lower than,
yes,
Well,
we've never
We've
adopted
never done what we've done.
Yeah,
here. I
we've
will
never
tell you,
done a
this is the most
maximum-
sophisticated we've ever been on a project.
on any impact fee. And so if that's what you're asking, I can't answer your
No,
question.
but there is basically a concept of just the historical nature. We have had higher impact fees for this very thing in the past. And I feel that if we account for inflation within those, we're at
That's
best
correct.
matching
Correct.
historical impact fees.
So when we dropped it from 4,000 to 3,700, we did it during a time because we had imposed the public safety impact fee, which was $300, and we wanted to keep it a net neutral on the builders, but we knew it was coming at a cost of what was even historically what we had collected. And again, it was a time we were in recession. We knew we had some people that were really struggling with that, and so that's why we did it. The process that you've gone through again isn't not only such a good process, but I think we're going to duplicate the same process in each of our capital facilities plan, where the council gets to see, these guys have a requirement. These guys have one requirement by law, and that is the maximum allowable. That's it. That's their only requirement under the law.
So
They've done that, and then it's the heavy lifting is you guys to start to shift it around and say, instead of saying, well, we just think 3,500 makes sense because it's comparable to somebody else, it actually, you can go right to what you have already set as the priority and say the math is simply what's on the right side of the equal sign.
Where's the Mill Creek Trail then?
Right
Number
there by
73.
by
Oh, up here?
the church, down at the dip, Buena Vista dip.
So we drive out a lot of homeless.
So basically that goes up, that trail follows Mill Creek up,
Exactly.
up the gully, up through there.
So, in all
So we
fairness,
would actually build a trailhead, turning
there.
off Buena Vista, and
correct.
right inside of there and all that.
that'd be beautiful.
Well, with us doing the boilers right across the street, it's, now, for me, I'd be fine pushing that trailhead off a little bit.
So the
Other
objective,
other than you do get, like I said, the reason I like it is because you're taking a trail from out of the boilers down to nowhere right now.
Exactly.
If you develop this, you've developed a whole system.
One of the things that I was thinking about that, well, if I feel that why I was going down my thought and reasoning is that we cut things back for good reason at a right time on this. I feel like what we're really doing is almost restoring it to our historical investment that we have and still getting a better product out of the end of it. I appreciate what you said, Councilman Turek, of your thoughts on Mill Creek and how that would be a good complement to another park. I think it's important for us to get the best concept and the best value out of things. And if we can connect a park to a park, it does more than just a doubling effect. It has an exponential value, I think, of what you can do to it.
Well, like you say, that park is a cheap park because we don't have to have irrigation. We don't have to have grass. It's a natural.
Just
Natural
enjoy nature
park.
park. And there, I think that's a lot of the concepts that I feel like we have as a council is we have a unique geography and a unique neighbor in having this, tortoise preserve next to us. And connecting slowly as we get up into that, I think is a unique concept that we should preserve. I agree.
to your point, Councilman, I was talking to an individual, a citizen of ours the other day, and they made that very point that you did, and that is, once we connect these parks, which remember, the ultimate objective is that you could start at the trailhead up in the tortoise preserve and eventually wind your way all the way down to Sullivan, and then, of course, across Sullivan and maybe even eventually to Pineview. But as you connect these parks, the value is more than a one.
Exactly.
It's a one plus, because you've now made this connection, so this park becomes an integral part of this park.
And I think discussing the vision that Councilman Turek has is important because it builds that we're providing vision and the idea of what these parks will do within this time frame. So I think it's important to address it, and I'd be willing, under what you voiced tonight, I know it has an impact that's higher than I was hoping for, but considering where we were historically and what we're trying to achieve in this window, I think it needs to be addressed, and I think that's what we should do.
Thanks, Councilman.
Right, any other discussion?
Well, just one statement that I'll make more to the audience. We've had a lot of input on this, and there is the possibility of a vote coming tomorrow. If there's any input from folks, I'd love to see emails or calls or comments, because we have changed some things here. But I'm very thankful to staff and for you guys putting this together. It's a great way to make a decision, I think.
Any comments out there?
So I feel like he's waiting for us to ask him to add more things and take more things out of his spreadsheet.
We're actually waiting for the mayor to conclude this and move on to the next
I
item.
I think he really wants to move his spreadsheet around, do some more number.
No, I will tell you,
Yeah.
I love the spreadsheet because
Yeah.
exactly that. I mean, we can take this and say, what if we did this? Boom, there it is. So thank you for your time and talents.
No, thank you. And also, I think we've said this before, but we just, we said before, basically this council, we think you guys understand this process, understand this plan really well. And we appreciate your input on this. So.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on. Item 4, discussion and review of a proposed purchase agreement for real property.
So Mayor, I'm just going to touch on this tonight. without going into a lot of detail within your package, is both the value, the appraisal. This is our appraisal that was done on the potential expansion of the dog park, along with the agreement. I want to express a little bit of my appreciation to Councilman Belliston for some help in that process. He's kind of used to seeing these types of agreements and things and helping with that. So what we will be looking for tomorrow, by the way, the appraisal came in almost exactly to what the previous appraisal had come in as well. But it was a good check. It was a good check for us. So we'll be looking tomorrow for, at that time, an acceptance of the real estate purchase agreement with the dollar amounts in there. I don't think, unless there's any question.
All right. I think I'm going to indulge here in the exercise of mayoral privilege, if I may. I see Jamie out there. Thank you for coming. Jamie's gala night, and you should be there, but I know you wanted to hopefully or at least listen to our discussion. I think I'd like to move number 9 up to next, if council's okay with that. And have that
Second.
discussion.
No problem.
Have that discussion so Jamie can get back and entertain us. By the way, we want season tickets. I don't know if my wife showed up, but okay. Okay, we'll move on to item 9 then, discussion review of the Brigham's Playhouse. I'd like to have Councilman Ward lead out on that.
All right, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna step down here and do it. I don't know.
Officially?
Yeah, well, so I can see your faces a little bit better and talk to you a little bit about this. So, I'm gonna give you a little background on this. We've had some really interesting conversations in the last little while about RAP tax funding and what we're doing with the RAP tax funding. And there was an interesting vote on that. But you know, if my church can't be a church, I guess the down the line, and the next best thing would be a community arts center, and I think that's a great thing there. So support that. But one of the concerns that I had was, and I made this comment once before, but putting arts in the building. So I was talking to one of our city functions, and I was talking to Jimmy Hughes, and he made the statement that he really laments seeing those buses run around empty. And I thought to myself, I'm really going to lament if we have an arts facility and it's empty, and started kind of getting concerned about that and thinking about that. And so I reached out to Brigham's Playhouse and just started a conversation there. I think that I wanted to just check on them, see how they were doing. And I guess the reasons for that are when I look at arts and the RAP tax, I think is really quite a nice thing. We have money and available to us to do good things like arts in the community. And frankly, we didn't have to pass that tax or raise a tax there on our citizens, but we have that money available. And I started kind of listing down through those items of what to me, what do I really want out of arts? And I started thinking about, what you want out of your arts. I really like the idea that it's family friendly. There's a fair amount of the arts in our world that is that might look at our little small tidy little community here and might say, we'll teach you Hicks a thing or two about the real world. And that's not my favorite aspect of the arts. But I also wanted some arts that has, if I was going to put something in that building, I want something in there that is supported by our community. And I think we've seen an enormous amount of outreach from Brigham's Playhouse and the individuals that support that. And so I truly appreciate that. The other thing that I really want from arts is in two categories. And one is the outreach that they do with the youth. And so they have this summer program where they're outreaching to the youth and they're bringing them in. And I think the idea that it is an art that outreaches to the youth, but also is reciprocal, and the youth actually want to be involved in that, to me suggests that it's a good fit for our community as well. And the third is a little bit hard to define a little bit, and it goes into the basics of what art is. And so apparently, if you look at many definitions of art, anytime I'm painting by numbers, apparently that's not art, because it's not. I appreciate that the mayor actually smiled at that. that it's not really art because it's copying something, and there's an element of play, of experiment, and of testing the world out. And you see this in some of the great artists, and you wonder. I started thinking about that. How does that fit with actual plays? And you really see it's an interesting amount of play because you as the audience member actually get to experience the world through somebody else's eyes, through this imaginary character on the stage's eyes. And I personally really like that about art. It's the opportunity to gain a vision from somebody else's perspective and leave that changed in some way. Anyway, so that was a little bit long on an intro there, but I reached out to Brigham's Playhouse, wanted to check on them because I didn't want to lose what we already have with Brigham's Playhouse in our community, and I really respect what they have done. And so I want to kind of highlight some things that they've done that are great progress here. They've moved forward, and they have the application, and it's stamped and sealed by the great state of Utah to be a nonprofit entity. That's been something that's been a concern to the council, I know. Those are a nonprofit entity and a 501c3 are not exactly the same thing, but they're well on their way to getting the 501c status available there and having the nonprofit entity. There was also, I'm going to just address this a little bit. There was also some kind of rumors going around about the location, the Staley property out there. I guess during the transition from the parents to I guess Robbie, is it just Robbie or is there more? Just Robbie. The parents had kind of had really given quite a gift to the Playhouse, almost a donation in a very below market value rental rate. And when that changed over to Robbie, he ended up having a lawyer come in, and he kind of put some language together about that was maybe, I'm going to suggest that his lawyer probably didn't really truly understand what a Playhouse does. Put some language in there like you can't change things and paint on the premises, and so there was a little bit of concern about the property, and they've regularly met with Robbie Staley, and they're meeting again Friday and should be signing at that time a 3 or 5 year lease for that property. And so some really good things there. One of the other real benefits to going with a 501c3, and I have to say that correctly, a nonprofit organization, is having a board of directors. And so I think that's a measurement of Brigham's Playhouse support within the community, the caliber of individuals who are responding to that and stepping up to that. So I would like to take just a brief moment here and just introduce Ken Hall, who is on their board, and have him step forward and tell us a little bit about himself. They put you on the spot for that, and anything you'd like to add to this discussion. But it's been a pleasure to work with him and Brigham's Playhouse, and again, the caliber of individuals that step forward to help our friends at Brigham's Playhouse.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm a huge Brigham's Playhouse fan and have enjoyed the interaction that I've had with them. My background, I'm currently the director of the MBA program up at Southern Utah University. I have had a random career from making gasoline at Exxon to working for Bain and Company doing consulting for large corporations on strategic issues. I spent a dozen years running the marketing and merchandising processes at PetSmart as their chief marketing officer and senior vice president, and then did a 3-year volunteer assignment for my church in California. So I am thrilled to be here. One of the things that I think Brigham's Playhouse will benefit as we go forward is as we're able to have a board of directors that can come in, that can help support where they're going, they can take a little bit more view of Brigham's Playhouse as a business and let the artists take a little bit more perspective of Brigham's Playhouse as a theater. And I think that's one of the things that a board is going to really bring some strength. My background is not in theater. It's not what I do. I can tell you a lot about making gasoline or running business. I teach marketing or management classes at the university. I can talk about that. How to get someone to perform on stage, it's not my thing. But I love the place that art provides for us as a community. I love what it does for us as a community, and getting a board of directors that can help support the artists in having an effective, self-sustaining business, a business that's going to take care of itself and do good things, I think is important. The other thing I think is really critical is Brigham's Playhouse transitions to a nonprofit and works towards 501c3 status. The nonprofit entity now is a community entity. It's not owned by an individual. It's owned by the public and the support of the public. And I think that also is a good place as we think about going forward and what Brigham's Playhouse can provide for us.
Thank you. One thing that I'd like to say, I don't know if you're finished, but if there's other thoughts too, Councilman Ward, I appreciate this conversation because there's been a lot of just trying to connect some dots with the intentions. Also, there's been a lot of good, solid concerns expressed by the council. I appreciate the growth that's happened from this process. I appreciate the concept of growing into the concept of having a board now helping out the concept to support both the artistry, but now transitioning this to a city. It's an identity. I appreciate how you said that, becoming a community entity. I too am very grateful for the concept of arts. I know nothing enough to say I can make anything better about it. But I too value the concept of what it does to the options that we afford our citizens. So bringing that into a community identity rather than just a commercial / business identity has been the goal of the council and the way in which they've funded it, and a lot that plays into how we'd like to fund it in the future. If there's options which we can't support this community concept, we want to do it responsibly, but also with the community in mind.
So, can I ask a question? You've said a couple of times a nonprofit, not necessarily 501(c)(3). Are you looking at a different structure than 501(c)(3)?
No. So the nonprofit, as I understand it, is the legal structure. A 501c3 status is the ability to be approved to receive tax exemptions for donations. The process of getting 501c3 is going to take a little longer, but that is absolutely where we want to go.
I asked that because in our conversation a month or so ago, you mentioned there might be another structure. I bring it up for this simple fact that the issue with me has always been, you can have the most noble intentions, you can have the best company, but if the law says one thing, you either comply with the law or you get the law changed.
Well, and I think that's a place where we kind of been on. It's, you know, I mean, I get it, but let's go ahead and define what a loophole is, right? I mean, a loophole is legal. So we haven't done anything illegal in that process, and I grant that you have your opinion on that. That's not the way you want it. It's a little bit semantic at this point because we're going there. That's where the Brigham's Playhouse is going, and that's where we're going to arrive. But
just let me finish for a second. There are other structures. I'm only saying that if it spells out one structure and you're pursuing a different avenue, get the law changed, right?
well, so and you and I have talked about this a number of times, but we haven't done anything illegal about the way we have done it thus far.
I'm not
Your
comfortable.
interpretation of that is uncomfortableness about it, but it is a loophole, and by the definition of loophole, we're legal with that. So I mean, I don't.
I would agree with you, exactly what you say, it's been illegal, we have acted legally.
Yes.
Sometimes I've questioned a little bit early on, when a portion of those funds were going to that supporting entity, that was my problem, saying, yeah, we're going through a loophole, but we're paying for the experience, and I wasn't real comfortable with that. But
And I
can
appreciate
where
that
you're
as
going.
well. You know, I think in talking to Kimberly, I think we maybe, I wish we would have looked at that a little closer. I think we probably could have even used the city's 501c3 to accomplish the same thing. But again, we're kind of past that. And I think there's,
That's what I said, I can
so
appreciate where you're
on the
going.
upside with this, you know, we gain a board, we gain this type of support, and we gain, so you know, and again, it's a best of both worlds kind of a scenario, because you don't really want your business people running your theaters and running your arts, because we see what Hollywood does when they have business people running those arts. So we get arts people running arts, and then we get the support of business people in the community. And I think it's
I
a
would agree with that.
great place to arrive there. So, and I think, you know, a lot better than Hollywood there. So I think, and again, certainly willing to entertain other comments and questions. But I really did just want to, reminds me of what we're going through out in the fields. I think I'm really heartened by the idea of looking forward and making plans and trying to preserve things that we want, especially things that are beautiful in our community. And so I kind of looked the same way at Brigham's Playhouse. I thought, well, I want to preserve something here. It would be very difficult to try to get what we already have to if we lost Brigham's Playhouse. And yet I still think they've talked about a long-term vision, and I think it really plays very well into the community that we have here with Cedar City's plays, as well as Tonawin, almost like a, what do you say? Tuacahn, yes, it's in the same neighborhood.
Concord too.
Yeah, thank you for that. But you know, kind of this concept of almost a New York diamond market, where we have someday maybe we have a really great draw of artists and become regionally known for what we have here. So I appreciate what Brigham's Playhouse has done there, and I'm glad that we have some future council members who are hearing this as well. I'd like to see us just have a long-term, wonderful relationship, both supporting each other. So
Well, I appreciate you bringing out, some of the facts that you brought here tonight were my biggest concerns. One of those longevity. And to hear that we're looking at a 5-year contract in there, gives me a whole lot more comfort than
Yeah.
they might be gone in December.
yeah,
And so I'm much more willing to say, okay, hey, they're here for 5 years. Let's make sure they're successful for 5 years.
yeah, and there was
So
some
of that
conversation.
stuff is
Yeah.
being solidified. Some of the things you're seeing here with the nonprofit, to me, it's been a good process, because I think
Exactly.
we've made them better. I think it's improved the quality that we're going to get into the community portion of it. I see
You
it's a
know,
better process.
I think that's the two parts that when I was pulling in earlier is just, this has been a productive process. I know there's been some concern on both parties that I think by going through this process, it's only become better. So I don't fault either party in the concept that we've tried to do both with the funds and the idea of what we want to provide. But I think it's getting even better. And I do appreciate the efforts that have come forth to address the needs that as we brought them up.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I agree with your point. The comment is made that we'd be afraid to lose them, and I just wanted to put some love out there to make sure that that some other city doesn't scarf them up and take them. And so, because but I think we're in good shape that way at this point. So, great. Any other comments that either of you wanted to make, or the council?
Here's one of my comments is
Yes.
to Jamie. Are you sleeping any better?
I am.
No, I can't even imagine trying to get that started, and especially in the field of arts, you know. And kudos to you for doing that. Kudos to the council too for supporting you, and you know, they're valid questions and that, but we look forward to a long-term relationship. So,
Yeah.
How did the gala go? Is it still going?
It's still
It's
ongoing.
going
Okay.
well.
Well, I'm glad the mayor moved that up then.
Yeah, get back there and put us down for I didn't know if my wife showed up or not, but
And the mayor's buying mine, my wife's too,
Yeah.
so put mine on his, will you?
yep.
You know, and I was thinking,
Thank you, Councilman Ward. Thank you. Very nice to meet you, sir. Okay, we'll move back to item 5, discussion amending the Washington City 2019-2020 fiscal year budget for the funds of Washington City. Kimberly Rich.
Mayor and Council, this was just an opportunity to go over and see if there had been any questions. Be prudent to try and get before you tonight instead of having any questions that might pop up tomorrow. So again, as a reminder, this is a budget increase of about $848 that's been available for your review, and that has also been available and out to the public since it was presented to you back in October. So do you have any questions on this material or
I have just one
information? Or
question. It's probably more so for Drew than for you, but just since it's a work night, and this is what we do. One of the thoughts that I had concerning the community development portion of that, our plan checking,
Mhm.
what would be the problem if we just,
Versus having the pass through.
yeah, rather than us having to take the third party and bill you for the third party services, we just let the private sector take care of it.
Any of these big, Ovation for one. I mean, I think Councilman Bellison's project is one. Ovation, I've got the apartment complex next to it. We were letting them go out to a third party.
Then we get away from the twofold argument. Number one, that we're collecting and paying the third party. And the part of that is that we're holding up their plans. We let the private sector decide that. But it's not holding up your plans. That's you and your engineer.
Well, ever since we've gone to a full-time plans examiner, we really haven't been holding up anybody's plans. You know, they've been turned around.
What's our problem? What are we trying to do then? We're not-
This is for the big projects. This is what we're trying to say is we put this for those big, you know, these big multi-family or, you know, if someone brought in a
So
big
if we're
box.
allowing them to do that now, then why do we even need this portion?
That's what this is for. That's what, because we're starting to do this now. What the problem is, but if you want to jump in, is the money's not been in there. We collect it, but we have never been budgeting that way for
But
those.
if we're allowing them
Question
to,
is saying,
yeah,
why does it have to run through us? So
exactly.
basically,
They're their own
they invoice
stamp.
us, we turn around and pass the invoice on to the developers. We're saying, why do we have to be the middleman? Is there a way that we can just have them contract directly with our approved list and not have to funnel it?
It's probably an option. I just don't want it, I don't want it willy-nilly, anybody they can go, you know, because I don't want to end up with a, and I don't really want to say this in a bad, that's what I want is if it's a pre-approved list, that's probably okay because really that's what it is. You know, we're doing.
Exactly. Here's your list you choose from. Then we don't have to even get into this budget. We're not a part of it.
Let them just pay whatever
Pay
they,
whatever between them and their engineer.
I guess my only concern might be that is if it ends up going that way, I just don't, I'm hoping that the developer doesn't end up getting a higher bill because they may think he can get it that way through having to do them, or if it's coming through us, we can say, that sounds a little high.
To choose from.
Yeah,
I mean, if we only had one or two, then I'd say, okay, yeah, we've given an opportunity here, but if you've got a list to choose from, it's a free market.
Well, to be honest with you, I have no problem. I just thought this was one of the solutions we were doing because what was happening is we were sending them out to one of those who was ever available.
I just see us taking a
So,
whole lot of problems away from us and not having to worry about a budget.
no, I'm fine. If we go to an approval list, these are the only 5 you can use. That's the only ones we're going to accept. They bring it in and it's
So let me
stamped.
ask you this question because I understand where we're at. One is this is a new phenomenon for us,
Right.
because we have these massive projects.
So I think you're going to see more of it.
Well,
It
you're
seems
right.
to be the direction that's, especially the apartment complexes.
You're right, but what I'm saying is that to this point, this is how we proceeded. So I'm assuming, this is a question to you, Drew, we still need to get a budget coverage for the moment, even if we change the policy, and somebody can change this if need be. But because we've had these big projects come before us, we've already processed them this way.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with what you recommend. Doesn't sound like Drew does either, but my question that I'm asking is this to cover the what we have not budgeted for up to this point that we've expended?
Both. It's to cover what's been expensed so far and projected out to the end of the year. So it's covering
We can
both.
change the, so Councilman, I want to get to this because I think this goes to the heart of what really is the request. I don't think we have a problem with changing that policy, but we may have to have still this budget addressed. We're whole. So it's just we have to recognize the revenue and the expenditure. But I don't have a problem, and I don't think Drew does either.
I don't
with
either.
changing the policy, but I wanted to be clear. This is our policy, and that's what, and it's just blossomed on us, blown up on us to the point we didn't have it covered within the budget.
And we didn't want to hold people up, so that's why we turned this. Now, there may be something I don't know about that I probably want to talk to
So,
with the building official about. I mean, I'm just saying, just in case there might be something I have no idea out there that,
I guess to clarify for my own clarification, if what we're doing now is passing through to clean up the budget, so we just have to recognize the income that's going to come in from that, and the outgo that's going to come in.
Yeah, well, there's nothing that's being expended on the part of the city that's not being covered.
yeah,
But
whatever
we have
it
to
costs.
Recognize it within the budget. And
Yep.
because these are exploded so big on us.
A portion of that obviously is because we've got the Stilts vision plan that's being covered as part of that.
Yeah, that's an expenditure. That's not an income.
So part of that's being covered through this, so there's actually some coverage that's happening
Yeah.
above and beyond what.
Yeah, everything that's been passed through at this point has been passed through a
Yeah.
cost. But the problem is we didn't recognize it within the budget to the level that it needed to be because we've had these big projects that are blowing up on us.
Yeah, so 75 is the total, 50 is for these third party to have in there as that pass through again, and 25 for the group that you had stand before you get in the meeting to cover for that
Well,
new
and you'll
design
need
standards.
whatever we've already
The-
processed. under
already
the
processed,
policy we
exactly.
have, and that's all we're asking here.
Yeah.
It's not a new expenditure. It's a revenue and expenditure. It's
Yeah,
not.
but there is some going forward. So there's some projection.
Yeah. Well, and if the councilman feels strongly about changing the policy, my only concern would be, I don't want to, it may not mean anything, but in a big project like Ovation, we kind of change midstream, what does that do to, or maybe we just go through the rest of the fiscal year with this request.
Oh, that's-
to policy.
I'll
I
throw
don't
it
have a
out for
problem
the
with
future
policy.
council. To me, let the private sector operate, and us staying out of it is a much better proposal.
I will still recommend that we have a pre-approved list.
Go let a couple.
Absolutely.
decide.
It'll have to be a pre-approved list, just so, we'll probably stay with the ones we've been going with. There's 3 of them that we're very comfortable, that have performed well, and we haven't found any problems. Now, again, Ovation's the only one. Well, I guess I've got, what's the one right next to you, Coyote Creek? Red Rock, Coyote Creek's the one across from Ovation. So those Ovation already moving forward. Don't know if we ran into any problems that plan's, examination might have missed, but not to my knowledge yet. I can get with my building department and find out. And again, we have the other one going. These other ones are about to start. You can walk into the office and see the tree trunks sitting all over the floors in there. So we've got them moving. But again, I think I'm fine with it. We ran to this because it helped them out in the long run, took the burden off with all the houses we're doing. This was our alternative, is to offer this out that way.
That's why I say get out of it, get out of the way.
And then we pretty much have been. It's just we've been the one, because we want to make sure it's getting out there, that we're keeping an eye on those guys, getting it in as quick. Again, it's that third, but again, I'd just soon stay out of it too. Why should I need to be in there?
I think they have the motivation to get in as fast as
Well,
they possibly
the
can.
contractor's going to be cracking the whip, and they want to get started. So yeah.
Exactly. We don't even
Private
have to do
sector
that
operate
part.
itself and
Yeah.
just
Well,
facilitate what our piece of the puzzle inside. Let the private
with
sector
as much
operate.
as our guys are doing and the limited numbers, I lost another inspector a week ago. So yeah, I just as soon make it easier on them too. So, because it's hard to find inspectors.
Just so,
Right now.
till I'm clear here, the plan inspector, what they're doing is they are actually making sure that this complies with Washington code though, right?
Well, yeah, which is the International Building Code, which we've adopted through the state, and the state's adopted through the International Building Council. Yeah, they're making sure the plans meet the code. Exiting, firewalls, I mean, the list of array, the electrical plan, the
Code's code, yeah.
code, yep.
So is there another review at the plan stage for Washington city codes compliance?
But we'll look
Have
at,
any other
we'll look
codes.
at site plans.
Yeah, site plans.
We'll look at site plans. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
They don't cover site plans. They cover the construction, which is the International Building Code, which is we've adopted.
Our Public Works Department looks at the site plans, make sure the drainage, all those things are in place, what it needs to be. The building department looks at the plans, but in these cases, we've been sending them out to a big firm, and they'll divvy it out to their specialist in plumbing, electrical, all the engineers they have on staff go through and look at that as to inspect, make sure it's meeting the codes. And then they send it back to us with their stamps on it saying they think the plans, or they get them fixed, whoever, the developer is, and then they put an approval on it. And then we get the permits out. So,
Thanks, Drew.
Anything else?
No, I've brought up, my only concern is I appreciate the innovation and concept of what may happen with the changeover from not having a private company come in and having the community center take over the little snack shack they have in there.
Yes.
One of my concerns is I just want to follow that as the transition happens to see just how that is performing and to see.
Yeah, I was interested to see that come back.
Yeah.
Part of the reason we did away with that is it didn't perform the first time.
I know, so-
So we're going back in history. again,
So
like, okay.
that's one
Well,
where
so
I
you
just
there-
want to
Management
see
change.
how that
Yeah,
happens
I
over
think-
time.
Mhm.
I think that's a fair request. And when we have some track
Yeah.
record, I think to Councilman Bellison's point, that's correct. There are lots of parts and pieces, and I think we have a different part now and a different piece. And we don't know still. One of the problems we have with our snack areas, both at the community center and at the golf course, is that they're just so small that when we try to bid them out, you can throw a party and nobody shows up. And then if it's going to fit that particular niche with that particular person, a number of clients, patrons. And so I think you're right. There's just some different parts and pieces, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed that we're not coming back with a different idea in the future.
Well, so Councilman
This is a
Turner,
little
that
bit
was one
incremental.
of my questions, was why did we go this way in the first place? But you recall that was,
It was a revenue. It wasn't sustaining itself.
but we're thinking at this point that not only can we sustain, but we can actually improve the quality of customer service primarily.
Well, that was the one thing that we could control when we had it before. That was some of what we looked at by deciding to go the route we did of putting it out, was we lost control of the customer service end of it and the
How-
effects that would be on our center. And
Now, how's
it's a
that?
concern that we had.
How did we lose control of our customer service?
Well, for the mere fact we put it out to bid, it allowed another third party to come in and become his.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying something different, so. okay.
Yeah, no, but when we were operating it, we controlled it. So we had control of the quality of food that was there, the customer service that was happening, when it was open, the types of things that were being served. And of course, when you did it out, we turned loose all that to say, whenever it's your business, you open it when you want, you serve what you want, you charge what you want.
Oh, even the hours of service?
Yeah.
That became, in my mind, that became a sticking point. They were not there when people were like, oh, we want something to eat, well, it's closed. Because it was not busy during the afternoon, so they just went, well, close it.
It's a unique thing that I would just like to watch as it goes forward, because it's a very bold statement. And I trust the vision of what they put out there, but I just want to see the accountability as it goes forward.
And I mean, obviously, I guess it depends on how broad you want to go. I mean, there's some things, if you say, hey, we're going to serve drinks, we're going to serve a candy bar, and some of those things, your overhead's pretty, I mean, your labor becomes your overhead for the most part. Where if all of a sudden it becomes into hamburgers and nachos and all, then of course you have food that spoils or doesn't, those types of things happen. And so, no, yeah, I was just kind of interested to see it come back around, because we danced the dance once and said, no, we don't want to dance this way, we want to do something different. But, sometimes trying to different, we find out, well, maybe it's better to dance that dance.
Yeah. Appreciate that perspective. I have no other concerns.
Okay. We'll move on to item 6 then. Financial update.
So, Mayor and Council, in your packets, I actually just had Tara, I gave them to her today, so I believe that they're in there for you, which is just the budget status report through the first quarter, which is September 30th, 2019. And then my write-up that just kind of gives the highlight. Now, the first quarter is typically fairly bland. There's not a lot that's going on, obviously, in those first few months. And when it comes to the governmental side, the major revenues in terms of the general fund are taxes, and those are reported later in the fiscal year. So for time's sake for tonight and what we're doing, I'm just simply going to go over the very first paragraph where I talked about some of the highlights. And then I'll let you continue to review. If you guys have any questions regarding anything you want me to follow up further on, feel free. But the biggest point to make is that there are no budgetary concerns from the finance department and that revenue expenses are on target for the year. In terms of some highlighted things that occurred during the first quarter, is we did already do a budget amendment during that first quarter to allow for some budget corrections, expenditure rollovers, and some additional one-time spending. Of those one-time expenses that were approved in that budget opening, I believe only one item so far we've kind of moved forward on. The rest is still in the works on those items, but we did complete the recarpeting, or flooring project in the annex building. It turned out quite nice. If you ever want to come over and take a look at it, we're all quite pleased with the way that that turned over. The annex building is the old police department building, 95 North Main. I call it the Finance West Wing.
Is that what drove our city attorney a little bit again?
Yeah, that's where, yeah, so in the bottom floor, we have finance and legal services, and then the upper floor is where the IT division is.
Now, if you recarpet over there, aren't you afraid that IT will start thinking that you care about them?
But you know what, it is, we've got quite a unit over there. I'm over there about 8 hours a week in that building, but we come together on, yes, that's right. We like to be left, because you've got IT and finance. We're both very similar. Just leave us alone. We're going to do our thing.
You're not even looking at that
So, but it is great. That was original carpet from when that building was originally built over 20 years ago and stuff. And so it was a great addition that took place there. Let me see what else. We did one amendment to the master fee schedule where we allowed the charges for credit card payments. No revenue is reflected in the first quarter associated with this at that time. And then again, we've got 25% of the year that is elapsed. The overall combined total budget in terms of revenue and expenses were less than 1% collected. But if you start to look individually at the departments, basically they're on target. The general fund is the only fund that you'll see at this point where, for the most part, that you've got revenues and expenses that are in excess of revenues. Again, that has to do with what we talked about with the tax dollars. We've got our property taxes that will roll in November. And then from a sales tax standpoint, it reports 2 months behind. So we've only had 1 month of collections through the first quarter, basically. But no concerns on that. I did identify the RAP tax distributions that occurred so far during that first quarter from July. At the end of the first quarter, funds on hand were about $350,000. We have received some extra, our distribution already for October. So collectively year to date, we're at about $390,000 on hand, just to point that out. But from a growth standpoint, everything is really what we would expect, other than I did identify for the water operating revenues. It's actually about 32% over last year, which is, let's see, they're at 32% of their collections for the year, where we'd be at about 25%. But the revenue is actually up about 34% over last year. I looked into that in terms of contributing factors. The major contributing factors, there's 3, and one of them has to do with some rate changes. We have obviously substantial growth, and then the lack of participation during the summer, which covers this first quarter period. We had more water consumption than we have. And then our actually construction water is up quite a bit over the prior year, just from subdivision developments and stuff. So aside from that, everything else.
We should actually make money on that, correct?
On
the
construction water, yes, it has a different rate from the standard rate for that. So, but feel free to, again, review it at your leisure. You have the full budget status report that goes by the detail level. And if you have any questions or anything that come up, feel free to let me know. I'll probably not report again until December. So next month we will have the year-end financial statement presentation that will take place in the December meeting. And then in January, at your second meeting, we'll report at the end of the the second quarter.
Do we,
So-
do we vote on this to accept this tomorrow?
No,
This is
no,
just
not this at all.
information?
No, this is just, so the only thing you have, this is just quarterly. No,
It's
there's
already
nothing.
done, I
So
guess, yeah.
quarterly, I have to make
And
sure
when
that
is the
I'm
test? I
providing you
can't
with
remember
the
when
budget information to be compliant with state code. And so before, we used to just send out the actual budget status report, but we found it helpful if we actually, if I try to do a bit of a write-up and come before you to give you an opportunity if you have questions about, fun stuff. But tomorrow, tomorrow night, we'll have the public hearing and the budget opening. It's what we'll have tomorrow night. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. Move on to item 7, discussion and review of a proposed change to the city code amending section 9-10 subdivision regulations. Community Development Director, Drew Ellerman.
You'd have this better clarified. for
Genesis
us.
1 and 1. Through Revelations.
And in the beginning.
In the beginning. That's- And if you read the old one, it feels like it was written back by, I think, Adam or Abraham or Isaac. But have you had a chance to go through? I hope that when I did my bullet points, I appreciate Councilman Clough telling me he read through it. And I said, you must have had insomnia, and hopefully it cleared it up. But I hope that each one of those kind of helped you through. We didn't change everything. My intent when I started on this was just to get rid of the whole thing. And I studied quite a few other cities' subdivision ordinances and found a few I really liked. And I started going through ours and saying, well, here's, we can get rid of this. And I'm going, well, that's not so bad if I just fix this, and fix that, and bring it up to what we do today.
Well, I appreciate to start off, what you did with chapter 3 was a huge improvement. I think by making something that makes more sense to what you're trying to achieve. It's better checklist for the people who are doing stuff. Better, it's the direction where we want to go. I think that clarified a lot. I was trying to mirror it, and then you said, oh, we scratched this, we're not even doing it. And as I tried to look at the other one, I was like, wow, this is definitely a necessary change. I appreciate taking what we had as a concern of the council in the very end, talking about your rock walls. And I thought that was just beautiful how you brought in all the different engineers are going to look at that and make sure that we address those needs going forward. You've definitely done some really good changes to it and met all the concerns that I had, because when I first looked at what you were proposing, it wasn't enough for me to see what am I voting on. And it gave us a great stark contrast of the changes and what you proposed. And I think they're really good.
I appreciate that. I think
Yeah,
one of the
I'm gonna
biggest things I
suggest that
liked,
Dan may have been here too long. I just want to point that out, that he just referred to a public ordinance regarding plats as beautiful.
Either that or eyebrows, which was your previous comment. So we all have
It's
different
been quite
views of
the
beauty.
night.
Some
It-
get cotton roads, some are in paper. We're just trying our best.
I already have. Actually, it's an eyelash. It looks like I'm getting all the most, but I just didn't get an eyelash out of my eye. But I think one of the things that I really appreciate after what kind of brought me back home to keeping a lot of what we had was I read through Orem's subdivision ordinance. And the one thing we did add in chapter 3 was the overview of a subdivision approval process. And we went through line by line and kind of told them. And I thought, man, that is so good, because sometimes people just don't know, the process. So I'm going to just tell them, you really want to know where your plat's going? Well, hey, just pop into there, because, man, that thing just tells you,
Well, can I
here's
add
what
to
you do,
we're
boom,
working
boom,
on
boom.
as well? So we are also working on, and we've had something similar to this in times past, but we're improving on it, and that is a visual display of how the process works in all the processes. So we think this is a part of
Like a
being
flow chart or a?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're talking, as a matter of fact, we'll refer to state code. We'll give estimated timetables between this step and the next step.
That'd be
We
huge.
believe this is part of our role of being transparent. We're just not doing it with land use issues, but we're doing it with business license processes and other things. And that'll roll out over the next 3 or 4 months. It's some nice, colorful.
Kind of like how
Where
you'd go
will
to
you-
Google.
Where
and
will they go for
that
that?
YouTube
Well,
video.
we'll make them available on our website, of
Okay.
course, and then we'll make them available, as we've done in times past, in the lobbies of the Community Development Department and the Recorder's Office. But we'll be able to always have a place that we can refer them to and say, if you want to see exactly how the cycle processes, your estimated amount of time from step 3 to step 4, you can go here.
And then at some point, once that's in place, maybe we could get it in 3D and they can have VR goggles and walk through it.
One thing that I think you changed in here, it wasn't matching our city structure.
That's right.
We didn't have city engineer We didn't, I mean, going back with the proper terminology, which we actually have in place with our city, I thought was respectful. It made sense
Yep.
to actually point to where, rather than this concept of a thing that we didn't have. So I appreciate just the clarity, the delegation, everything just felt like it aligned better with what we were doing and what we wanted to do.
Who actually looks at it? Because some of those were in there saying that, the building official did this, but he had
Who's
nothing
the
to do with
building
that.
official, right?
And well, we know who he is, but he didn't dive into that at that point. He waits till it's built on, and just some things like that, and going back, I think one of the ones I still giggle about is we still called it tracing linen, that you'd bring a plat in on. I know that's the look I get from people. What's tracing linen? And the size that they gave was a size that I haven't seen since I was in high school. There's always these standard sizes of things that you draw on, and it was a 20 by 30 inch tracing linen that the plat would be done on in India black ink. And, I don't know how you can prove that was India black ink, or is all ink come from India that's black? I don't know. But it was just things like that. I wanted to just say some of these things are old and archaic. Let's just get it out and
So
not
do
cause.
you have to put a clause in there that says we've updated, it's correct, now you actually have to follow it?
No, you have to follow it. Yeah, that's what they've actually been following. That's what's the beauty about this. We're now actually putting into what we've been doing
Right.
is
making
our
it align.
process. Yeah. That's what the biggest reason I wanted to get it changed and everything was just to bring it up to date, get the checklist up to date.
Right.
That helps them out a ton. So Councilman Belson, I know everything look all right, or? No, okay.
Yeah, I expected more comments out of him as well.
I know.
That's when you know you've done a good job.
It must be.
The concerns got addressed. I'm good with it.
Well, good. That was
Attaboy.
sweeter. Short.
Thanks, Drew.
And that is all. Exclamation.
Exclamation. You did notice that. Appreciate that.
That's how he finished his report.
Okay. Last item, discussion of Washington City Events Committee. I'll turn the mic over to Councilman Clough.
I guess the purpose in me coming back on this is that I wanted to throw some ideas out to the council about what we were proposing to move forward with our community events. I found it interesting as I was reflecting on what was showing the growth of our city. Since I was interacting with the city, it's only grown by 850%, but I was trying to figure out Councilman Turek, and that puts you just shy of 5,500% change in your lifetime
Thank
here.
you for that math. I said that's a whole bunch.
Oh my goodness. I was running that calculation real quick. I was like, my goodness, we've changed a lot from when you were celebrating things as a kid here to when I was celebrating, and we're talking 750, 3,000. We're burgeoning just over 28,000 in 2018's estimates. We're a growing community that has a heritage. And for me, one of the concerns I have is, as I started to list names of people who are working in conjunction with the city on these events, you notice that there's family names that have done so much to preserve these heritage events. You got the Nysons, the Staleys, the Jensens, and you could go down list and list of people. And there's been this huge, due to the change, there's been a lot of, well, who should carry this burden forward and how should we communicate it? And it's been on my mind a lot because it almost feels like this woodshed treatment of lack of communication. Not that we don't want to, but it was what role should we do moving forward? And the purpose of trying to put more structure and communication into this is truly just to preserve the concept of our heritage events, to add a little bit more sustainability, not playing a game of who's on first, but here you are, this is what we'd like you to do, and let's move it forward, providing the concept that we're going to be representing a city and its identity and what we do in all of our events. It brought the city into the discussion and made it just important. So when I typed a lot of these things out, I talked to a lot of the people that are already serving. It's been a unique process over the past 2 years, and also talking with mayor and bringing it up to the council. There are really only 4 major events that we basically have a chair operating now. That could change in the future, but wanted to kind of bring that in to where we could start giving some structure to where we can account and say, well, there's someone that is handling that and we're supporting them. Obviously, we don't want to be the party planners, as some people like to say it, but we want to support the party. We want to come up. We want to see the awesome parts of our community continue forward. And so there was some structure that Councilman Granger put into it that I tried to throw in. I do fully admit that once this gets going, that there may be some more additional, some other changes that will happen, just to clarify a few things. But what was basically proposed that I wanted to see if people felt good on is, since this is, the very beginning basically says, the main purpose is to both celebrate and preserve our heritage as we grow forward in Washington City. All budgets, permitting, and supervision of the events are to be approved, determined, and accepted by the mayor and city council. We are a community that is recognized for community service and participation, and we seek to build capacity in our citizens in order to sustain our traditions and heritage that we celebrate in our unique hometown way. I want to make sure that if someone comes on, I like the idea of the 3-year commitment, both to come on and learn, one to operate, and one to transition. That was brought up by Councilwoman Granger. I think that's a beautiful, respectful way to add continuity to things and also add voices to the conversation. I thought the terms of service were important. That's really about the main things that, and that basically the appointments would be designated by basically the mayor and the council member that serves as chair, and or is kind of to be discussed if you feel like that is an appropriate thing or not. I feel like those are really the main things we need to discuss as a council. Otherwise, it'll be clarified as this really moves forward as a functioning committee in our community. So I wanted to get your inputs on basically those 2 points, and if there was something that I didn't see that you wanted to talk about as this being a concept within this committee.
No, I certainly appreciate the legwork you did there. I think it's important. The one, I guess, thought I would throw out, an idea, maybe you spoke, I look at like a Veterans Day that Parker Staley's done for years.
Right.
And all of a sudden now you're gonna say, okay, we're gonna roll that over every 3 years.
It could be an or, but it still
Yeah, I
goes
guess that would
at-
be my concern is, I don't know whether you've spoken with Burke and see what his thoughts would be about.
Right.
My personal opinion is if you would go tell Burke right now that we're gonna, 3 years you're transitioning out of there, you're gonna look out for feathers.
Well, I mean, I think one thing that might be important, maybe we could throw into this, the idea was a minimum of a 3. But if they're going to transition out, they have to leave a transition year out. And that'd be a perfect way of wording that as well. But
Well,
that
I think that's a
also-
good conversation to have with individuals is just to be talking to them about, well, we appreciate your service here. If you are thinking you're going to be out,
We need some.
maybe
filters
maybe your hip goes out. We would really like to help provide that.
My biggest concern on it is there's a 2-part sword in that. There are some people that work themselves to the bone, and it gives, I think, in a concept in a very respectful way, we don't want to boot anyone out of anything that's already happening.
Well, I guess I have 2 thoughts behind it. One of them is exactly what you're talking about. The other one is it gives other people opportunity.
And it gives them a way out, a structured way out to say, you know what, I'm done. Okay, I got 1 more year. This is how I'm going to do it. And I don't think we gave them that out. And I think they're carrying a lot of stuff and just frustrated. Likewise, just building more of the structure into these events going forward, that there's certain times of the year where they've got all of our attention. Okay, you guys are the prime thing this year. Okay, you've got what you need. We've got Art City in the same room. We've got the budgeting and all
What my
that.
thought with your committee would be that it would meet on a monthly basis. Because, I mean,
I agree.
you ought to be planning your 4th and 24th, those celebrations right now need to be, starting to be solidified up.
Right.
And put into play. We don't wait till May to say, oh man, we gotta have 4th of July put together.
You're right.
So
Mm-hmm.
basically it'd be a monthly meeting that they would have committed to be a part of. And of course, each of those would then go back and have their own committees, I guess is what you're thinking. That would be kind of the way I read it. Your committee chairs
Right.
are coming as part of this committee, then they're going back to their committees
Yes.
and making those assignments. One thought that I had would be, almost most of our events have a parade
Of
involved
some
with that.
sort. Yeah.
What if you were to have as one of your
parade
standing chairs, a parade chair?
Okay.
And that alleviates the need from each of those other committees to have somebody, well, for this parade, you contact this person. For this parade, you contact that person. For that
Right.
parade- If you had a standing 3-year
Parade chair.
parade chair, then there's some continuity there.
I think that's a unique concept because I think with what we've said within those, there's some miscellaneous things that I didn't put anything into because I didn't have the direction or understanding, honestly. We've got new high schools with new homecoming parades that we haven't even addressed yet. Or do we want those in those communities? I like the concept of the parade chair because they'll be a support to the other people that are running those events.
Correct.
I
Well,
love
if they're
it.
meeting those meetings, it's like, what do you need in your parade? What do you want?
How
in
can I
your
help
parade?
you out?
And that's, as the chair, then you're the voice out there.
I think that's a great idea.
Just to fill one of your slots. I mean, you've got some open slots, but that may
Yeah.
be one of your slot there. High school wise, I
It's a
guess one of the
different
things that's
thing.
always been a fun thing is they do their own parade. We just kind of
Well,
participate with
when
them.
it comes to a parade chair, they still have that point of, do you need permitting?
Correct. I
There's
mean,
the
you could help them
police,
that way.
there's something they could do of the
A lot
support
less,
too.
yeah, a lot less. I mean, you do the permitting, the process, the city portion of it, but not like you would do with your other, where you're lining them up, you're in charge. It's like, you know what, let those high school kids line up.
Let's see what happens at the end, right?
So that kind of similar thoughts there along that line, which is some of these, like Veterans Day, the Pine View School Parade and activities, they're not really at the same level as some of these other activities. Some of these are not really Washington City activities.
Exactly.
And I think, are you going to designate in some of these that there's a different level of, like the city is actually kind of spearheading certain activities, but they're just advisory and assist in other activities?
I really felt the intent of where I wanted to go at this phase is that we could overplan. We could, I think we need to take care of our golden nuggets in this first step. And my first step in considering was the first 4 main events. I feel like we have our Cotton Days, our Pioneers Day, our Veterans Day, and I think a huge concept that could be within this would be our Washington City Youth Council as well. I think those are 4 things that are huge and a very similar community events. They overlap and they tie very much. The parade chair, I think, is a good thing to throw into there as well. But I did recognize there are other things that may want to have some sort of oversight, but I think that may be coming just from the structure we have within our city. Because other things I did not particularly throw out was like the movies in the park, the Ironman breakfast, the Lion Cubs breakfast, Dogtown Half Marathon. We don't have particular chair for that, right? And maybe we don't. And I think those are things that can just be individually taken care of and addressed as those particular places come to us and petition the council for help. It's a different thing, and I'm not negating them or devaluing them, but those aren't our golden nuggets when it comes to this is a Washington City celebratory event.
Correct.
And I did not put Christmas in Dixie on here. Okay. And see, that's the other thing is I just wanted to have a council is the purpose of when we just had our final discussion to say, okay, from here, that allows the mayor to contact the people who are doing it now and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're meeting the first Tuesday of every month. We want to talk to you and make sure we have the people that will help you with this particular thing. The other thing I felt was important in the structure, Councilman Turk, is at the September of the year that's going to happen before. So right now we're in 2019. I was hoping to have this taken care of to where we can meet like September and talk about the 2020 events, talk about who's on first, who's doing what, introduce people, and have that initial kickoff to where we know what's going on. But we can take January and be fine and say, okay, we're in January. That gives us enough lead time toward addressing every
So
event.
this year you start in January, next year you move it to September.
Exactly. And so we just have that, just a nice cushion of building people up, lining things up.
Well, the positive thing I see, especially with this, is that you mentioned it, the importance of your budget. Because I think that's been one of the key components that's been kind of a loose nugget out there.
Exactly.
Is there hasn't been that direction of what is our budget to spend?
Exactly.
And so by doing this, you really infuse that, solidify that up. And I think
Yes.
that's a key component. to what
So
you're
the
doing.
only
It's a structure.
comment I would make along that line, I think January works, but that would be the latest. Because you want to be early enough when we begin the budget process. and submit
Exactly.
that over. January would be the absolute latest you want to.
See, and that's where I'm feeling that if we feel good about where it is, if we added the parade, chair, the Christmas and Dixie thing, we need to start now. And if we can, this is still a little bit behind the ball, starting in January. We might be able to do it earlier than that, but it is a lot better than what happened this year. And we can only ask for an improvement. And I really feel that if we start that, I'd like to get a little bit of advice from you, Roger. When would be appropriate? Is September too late? Or is that early enough if you did the year before the things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, January probably we could get it, but we start moving into February, March, and we're really solidifying the management.
Exactly.
At that point. So really anything before January
then would this be a fair thing if there's no further discussion with the council, if we added the parade chair and the Dixie chair, that would bring us to 6. And these are volunteer people, obviously, just the heritage we have in our community is volunteers are amazing, right? That allows the mayor to approach those who are already doing and also get people that we need to fill these chairs as soon as we can and get to work. Then at that point, it's just us reporting back as both the mayor and whoever the council member is to let us know, okay, this is what's coming up. Because I know as a council member, I got people pushing me all the time. Hey, are you guys doing this? What's going on? And I think it's just a service to all the council members who are representing within the community. Say it's being handled, and I know it's being handled. That's just so huge for us, I think.
Well, I think it's a key time too, because with the new council coming on, new council assignments, I'd be part of that assignment process, which is perfect.
Yep. So that would be my thoughts. So if there's outside of those two things, and we'll try to get this going as fast as we can. Is there any other thoughts that you guys had as we discussed this?
Well, I just kind of echoing the same thought that Councilman Turek had, though. I think there's some folks out here who have some real ownership of some of these. It would just be almost a cautionary. We want to supply leadership and continuity and, official budget information without giving the illusion that we're taking over. One, we don't want to take over anything more than we have to, but we don't want to threaten anybody's, what they've done. and their
Yeah, I
service
think the
that
biggest
they've
thing you can do is offer them that support system.
Yes.
They'd be looking for.
Yeah,
So
that's
say, hey, you've got this chairman of Veterans
Yep.
Day that then has a committee here that can help support him
Yep.
Right.
with whatever his needs are amongst his own committee.
And I think maybe said that I put the council, the idea with the 3-year came from Councilman Granger. If it's just a transition, there's 3 phases of your service, a year of underneath somebody, a term of service as the chair, and a transitional 1 year out. This still has a little bit of flexibility within the mayor to say, okay, well, you've been in it for 25 years. Here's your way out. Can you give this a year and bring someone into it?
Well, that or just that. I mean, like you say, those that have been involved,
Sometimes
they
they
want you to
just-
stay there, somebody want to transition, it gives them that opportunity. I would just hate to see it's a 3-year, we're going to transition you. It should be a voluntary thing to say, you
Okay.
know what, this is really my baby and I like doing it. And I can use that support and help. And yeah, I will give you, if I decide to transition out, I'll make sure we give you a year.
So you would feel better if just as long as we had the bookends and say, in between your service, make sure you account for these bookends.
Yeah, that's my thought process.
Okay.
There's really only one that I can think of that has that, and that's your Veterans Day. I look at your other events, and they're right now, I mean, your Cotton Days have been run for 2 or 3 years. I don't know where Mike stands. He may be ready to transition out.
Exactly.
So-
Exactly.
So, it may be an opportunity at that point for him to say, okay, yeah, I'll hang around for another year while I train somebody that, now that you've got some structure starting to come in behind me.
I just know a lot of my feeling as I talk to the people, they're like, well, I'm not even going to do this anymore. And it's like, how much we would lose if a person truly did just cut cold turkey and say, well, forget you guys. I mean, I don't want to see that. That's another thing is like, I feel like if these people knew they had the support too, they would just go, wow, maybe I do want to be
Well,
here.
and I think with that, you can help them. Some of those are find it harder to build their own committee. So you can support them with their subcommittee, for lack of a better term.
Fair.
For a Cotton Days committee, say, hey, okay, do you need some support from the mayor? What positions do you need to fill? What are you looking to fill? Let us help you with that. And you've got that. You've got now the committee for that to function with you. So I like that idea that you've got this group here that then can help support the satellite groups that are supporting you.
So I will mention too, just while we're on this topic, that we did meet with President Carnevale from the Washington State, and I'd said that I would do that after things had kind of settled down. And I think that the conversation was good. I think the Washington State, President Carnevale has actually brought this up in several meetings involving the other state presidents around the area. They're committed. Again, with that understanding that there's this support and early notice of what's needed on the part of the city. And I think part of the confidence has to be restored. Again, this is a celebration that really needs that other entity, because it is a celebration about that other entity. I mean, we have no primary classes. to put in a parade if that other entity wasn't there.
Well, it
would
is
look
the
like
state holiday.
Yeah,
I mean, so
well,
we
it
could,
is,
we
but-
could step into that, but I think the preference is for it to be.
Well,
there.
exactly, because what we talked about is if the city was to take that role, which we certainly could, it technically would be a mini cotton days.
Right.
You'd have much more commercialized parade, you'd have those sorts of things, because we don't have the capability of doing what historically has been done. The good news, though, again, and I assume this would be the case, especially with President Carnevale, is that, you know, they are in, and he is committed to talking about that and making that a reality. And I think if we can continue to have this structure that will offer support, I think their confidence will grow. There's some stake presidents that just don't like the thing, but I've compared it to Friends of Scouting. They're always going to complain whether it was difficult or not. They just don't like it. But he's in, and I feel really pretty good about where that's
But
going.
you had mentioned, I think you said this correctly, but it sounded like you were saying that other stakes were involved as well, and it's really just the Washington stake.
Well, Washington State, President Carnevale has talked to all the states and told them that he is looking for this under Elder Barney's approval, not supervision, his endorsement, under Elder Barney's endorsement, that the other stakes should get involved. There was grumbling. There was, again, we don't want to do Friends of Scouting, and we had to say that's not the topic. But the point is that I think under Elder Barney's endorsement, under President Carnevale, who's already talked about it twice, I believe, with all the other stake presidents, and all he's asking from us is, again, we're an active role and that we don't launch things at the last minute.
Yeah, and I think that's
So
the thing.
that's to your point.
If we bring in the structure, it's a brand new conversation.
Well, I know he must have had some conversations this weekend, because I got a text from one of his bishops saying, what's the city doing with the 24th of July? And I said, interestingly talk, it's on our agenda for Tuesday night. And he said, oh, our stake president's talking to us about it. So I don't know what the discussion was about.
Well, I can tell you, because I was there, he launched it through the High Council to just send out that we had the meeting that Roger mentioned, and just to tell the bishops, very long lead time to tell the bishops that they're asking for a booth, they're asking for a parade participation. So no surprise,
It's already
just
going.
send that out through the High Council to have
There
that.
you go. That's great. Let's
So-
get some structure in. And
My question on the 24th then is our role support?
Yeah. So here's what we're going to do, I think.
We provide the gifts and the.
Yeah, so right now, I think the understanding is, and Councilman Ward, correct me if you feel it's otherwise, anybody else weighed in if they think it should be otherwise. But the fact of the matter is, the city's always provided really three things. We provided the road, the closure of the road, the staff to handle it, yep. We provided the park, including getting it cleaned, putting up the garbage. Historically, what we've done is with the prizes and that, they've all bought tickets. It was a decision this year that was ridiculous. It wasn't even for the $200 that you gain off the thing. It's more of a menace than it is anything. So the city will take care of the prizes. They're just those cheap things that somehow my wife orders from too. But and so we would do that, and then the fireworks. And those are the things. Now, what they're asking for this year, and I think in part it's because there has been this misunderstanding over the last 2 or 3 years, which, by the way, really nobody's pointing at each other. It just kind of happened.
it's just there.
Is that we provide kind of the organizational leadership this year. And I think we're willing to do that. This structure that you're proposing, I think, fits perfectly. Tess up at the community center can offer assistance there too. But then again, with the understanding that what's most frustrating from President Carnevale's point of view is if everything gets thrown in, on June 15th.
Exactly.
On the wards, they get frustrated. And so I think we set a tentative date of March, I believe, would be when assignments would formally go out. But beyond that, Mayor, I think that'll grow back to kind of the balance that it should be. But I think that's certainly something we could
So
easily
One of my hopes within this, Mayor, is that once the city steps in and provides a little bit more structure, that we truly do offer an opportunity for this to expand within the community to better celebrate Pioneer Days. as it comes within our city.
So I'm still a little unsure of this one. The other ones I'm okay with.
We're taking the lead.
So we are gonna assign somebody to be the chairman of the 24th of July.
Initially.
Yeah, and it can be
And
organizational.
then they work with,
And then they will just give the assignment. Tell me if you
Within the
understand.
basic ideas, we're basically working with what we have now, making sure they're okay with it. And so we would approach who's already doing it and offer the continuity first.
who's already doing it.
Right now it is the Washington, Utah State.
Yeah, so this last year, of course, it kind of got cobbled together.
Yeah.
It was fine. It could have been better, but it got cobbled together. Most of the citizens were not any wiser, but how I understood it would be is that we would in March, as the lead of this year's 24th, we would say, we need this many people for the parade. We're going to have this many booths. We need those manned. And those assignments will come from Washington City out to the stake.
And they
Yeah,
fill it.
hopefully we have, I think that is a fair statement Councilman Ward said. I mean, there's not this commitment from other stakes, but I know President Carnevale is trying to get some
Right.
commitment from other stakes. That's probably a fair way to say it. But I think as we build on this, it will come. It will come.
That's what I'm hoping.
So I hope that's a better answer. We are going to lead out this year on the 24th with assignments, but they're willing to accept those assignments if they're given early enough.
So, and I think their understanding of the assignments is a booth from the wards and participation in typically for primary, but participation in the parade.
That's how I understand.
So I
it,
don't,
and that
if we,
pretty well
if we
covers it.
modify those assignments, that we
And
may,
I
we
don't
may
see you would
bump
need
into
to. I think
consternation.
That's the support you're
Well,
looking for.
I know, but if we put a chairperson in there, because this was, some of the consternation previously was, we would put chair people in there, and then they would invent new rules and new guidelines and new booths and requirements.
Correct.
And then people were like, wait a minute, no place in there did you even ask me for my permission. You're just telling me that got old really fast.
And I think that by this committee,
It lets
you'll
us
keep
check
that
that.
from happening,
It
because this
lets us
committee will
check
keep that
it.
structure. Exactly, check it right at the top.
You know, and it gives us an opportunity in this stepping forward because we can recognize the elephant in the room that there's been a really rough 7-8 years that's happened.
Let's recognize it without talking about it though.
Okay.
Because that's been my favorite part of this conversation, is not going back in the past.
But you know, the beauty is we're allowed that everyone's okay with the structure change as long as it makes sense. And I think everyone's willing to just see a step forward, and I wanted the city to take a step forward on this first. So I appreciate how it's been talked about.
Can I throw two items out there? I didn't want to interrupt as some of the conversations were rolling along, but I would just maybe suggest in your 3-year model of a person in there that you may have years where a person is only willing to commit to a single year, and you may want to think about how you address that. My suggestion would be, if you can only commit to a single year, please select your co-chair now, so that person sits with you this year and can transition directly into it next year.
You know, and I think that's the beautiful.
Because we
thing.
had that last year. It was the 24th, wasn't it?
Yeah, it
And he
was
said,
Mike
I'm a
Eaton.
1-year wonder, and he was upfront about it.
You know, what I've noticed about a lot of these, and I'm going to play into this, and maybe we're saying the same thing, by having that partnership basically happening all the time, either coming in and coming out, that it allows for that to happen, to have a one thing, as long as there's something attached to it.
Yeah.
And once we have the committee in place, we know the attachment is there before that person walks away.
Yeah. Just having it kind of fleshed out a little bit, so we don't run into especially with the 24th, we need to not stumble for a couple of years. That would be really healthy.
Well, I
Get
find
that
it's
foundation
unique.
back.
Yeah.
It's unique in trying to say
Yeah.
this because on one side we're saying, wait, we need to let someone do it for 10 years. And I want to say, wait, we need to do it for 1 year. And I get concerned that we got to have enough structure to where it's like, just do whatever you want, because that's not different than what we're doing now. And so to me, I feel like if we do a transitory period where you have, okay, you're going to learn it. And if they can prove they've already learned it, we could probably skip that step, but we'll vet that out in the chair process.
I want to clarify what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I have a little teeny bit of advice, and I'm glad you're handling it.
But no, I honestly wanted to address your concern of that concept. There may be a person that dropped out of it and wants to come back and do it. They don't need that 1-year bump up, and they're going to handle it for a year. We'll develop those opportunities
Yeah.
as we build leadership and find it. But the thing that I feel like everyone needs to know, both of the people who are doing this as the chair and us as the city, is the connection of resources and understanding. So
The only other item I had, and I just wrote this down really quickly because I had, it was actually one of the bishops mentioned to me as we introduced the 24th concept, is about the parade. Their request was to try to decommercialize the parade. And there's a feeling that it's just, the only people who participate are our businesses, and if they don't fit in with a theme. I would suggest that I think it makes it more complicated when we invent a yearly theme that is difficult. Like the theme for this year was a hero, and I thought, well, I'm driving a golf cart in the parade. I barely looked at I see a hero. That was the theme for the Veterans Day. I'm like, I don't have enough artistic creativity to I could maybe strap a U.S. flag on the back of the golf cart. That's about as good as I could come up with. But anyways, just explore. I would just, again, suggestion-wise, there are people in the public who would appreciate somewhat of a requirement to actually have something that looks like the theme. But I would, in order to accomplish that, I would also meet them halfway by making the theme more simple. So Pioneer Day is a perfect theme. I don't know that you have to pioneers in plaid or pioneers into the future or on the moon,
Right.
Perfectly my opinion. And then I want to restate my last thing, which is I have tiny suggestions, and I'm glad you're handling this.
Okay, if there's no more conversation, I think we feel good enough moving forward is that the council feels what we've talked about. I would like to move forward on this, Mayor, and get this in process as soon as we can.
And I would like all of you to think of names for me to submit.
Obviously, identify who's already doing it if they'd like to continue it, but please, give us names, let us know.
Did I mention the part about thank you for doing this?
Yes, thank you very much, Councilman Ward.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for all the effort on that.
It's just
I
important.
do know, just a side note, I talked to Mike Meese over at Pineview,
Oh, you did?
and I talked to Rusty over at
One of the Mustangs now.
Crimson Cliffs. Both of them just basically said, "We'll call you,"
Awesome, good.
which is good.
I'm
I
fine with
said,
that. I just addressed it and I really feel like we don't have to do every one of them.
Yeah.
We are nuggets.
but they want us to participate as far as participate in the parade, and obviously they felt like they want their kids to learn the process of going to the police chief and to Denise and learning how to book the parade and how to.
If we had the parade chair, it's like, hey, just so you guys know,
That's
you're
who you
about 2
talk
months
to.
out. Can we help you with anything?
Yeah, exactly
And they
right.
can pull those kids and have a conversation.
Yeah. Exactly right. All right, that's it for the night. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move. Second.
Hey.
No.
See you.
Aye.
Aye.
See you tomorrow.
Pretty good one.
Want the presentation and 1 by 17 form from our.
I do.